Clara Whitmore hit the frozen ground hard, her suitcase bursting open across the snow, and when the cowboy reached down to help her up, she slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me!" Nathan Cole stayed crouched, palm still open. "Ma'am, you're bleeding. You don't understand." Her voice cracked in half. "I'm different. Everybody who helps me ends up ruined. Ask anybody in this territory." "Then I reckon I'm already ruined," Nathan said and lifted her broken necklace out of the snow. Before we go on, subscribe to the channel. Stay with Clara and Nathan all the way to the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. She didn't take the necklace. That was the first thing Nathan Cole noticed about her, and he'd remember it for the rest of his life. A woman lying in the snow 20 miles from anywhere in a coat too thin for a Montana winter. And when a man held out the only pretty thing she owned, she looked at it like it was a loaded gun. "Keep it," Clara said. "It's yours." "Nothing's mine." She got up on her own. Her knees shook and she locked them straight so he wouldn't see. "Throw it out. Sell it. I don't care. It's got initials on it." "I know what's on it." Nathan turned the little silver oval in his fingers. The chain was snapped clean like somebody had grabbed it and pulled, and the letters engraved on the back weren't hers. He was sure of that much because the stagecoach driver had said her name 3 times before he dumped her luggage in the road, and it wasn't the name on that necklace. "Ma'am." "Don't call me that!" She started walking. Wrong direction, straight into the wind. "Call me Whitmore. Call me nothing. Just don't be kind to me, mister. I'm asking you sincerely." That's a strange thing to ask a man. It's the only thing I've got left to ask. Nathan stood there, a second hat brim, collecting snow, and watched her walk toward 40 miles of empty. He was 38 years old. He had 200 head of cattle. He couldn't feed a note at the bank. He couldn't pay. And a heart he'd nailed shut 4 years ago and hadn't opened for anybody, not once, not even for his own brother. He should have let her walk. He'd think about that later, how easy it would have been. One turn of the reins, one long ride home. Nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have ever known. "Miss Whitmore," she kept going. "Miss Whitmore, that road bends south in about a half mile, and then there's nothing till the Bitterroot cuts across, and the Bitterroot ain't frozen enough to walk and ain't open enough to swim. You'll be dead by dark." "Not hurt. Dead." She stopped. "That's fine," she said without turning around. And Nathan Cole, who had not been surprised by anything in 4 years, felt his stomach turn over. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "That is not fine." She wouldn't ride with him. That was the second thing. He offered her the horse and offered to walk alongside, and she looked at him like he'd proposed marriage, and then she said she'd walk behind, not beside, but she knew. "Behind. Why behind? So you can change your mind," Clara said. "Men change their minds about me. It's easier if you're already facing the other way." They walked 3 miles like that, him leading the horse her 10 feet back, keeping that distance exactly like it was measured with a rope. Finally, he said, "You want to tell me what the driver did?" "He did what he was paid to do. He left a woman in the road." "He left me in the road," she said. "That's a different thing, and you'll understand the difference before long." "Try me now." "No. Miss Whitmore." "I said no." Her voice went up and cracked, and she hated it. He could hear her hating it. "You want the story so you can decide about me. Everybody wants the story so they can decide. Well, I'm tired, mister. I'm so tired I could lay down in this snow and be glad. So let's skip to the end. You'll hear it from somebody in town inside of a week, and then you'll come find me and tell me you can't have me on your place, and I'll say I understand, because I do understand, and then I'll be back on the road anyway. Only I'll be tireder, so let's just not." Nathan stopped walking. He turned around. She flinched. Hard. Half a step back, hands coming up, and it was the fastest thing he'd seen her, do faster than anything a person does on purpose. That flinch didn't come from her head. It came from somewhere older. Nathan looked at that flinch for a long moment. Then he took his hat off. Just took it off in the middle of a snowfield and held it against his chest. "I don't want the story," he said. Clara stared at him. "I want you to get to my kitchen before your feet turn black," Nathan said. "The story can go to hell. The story's business. But your feet are my business now because I found you, and out here, that's the whole law. Ask anybody. A man finds a person, freezing that person's his business till they ain't freezing anymore. That's it. That's the entire arrangement. Nobody's ever, Clara stopped. Nobody's ever what, nothing? Nobody's ever what, Miss Whitmore? Nobody's ever put their hat over their heart for me, she said, and then she looked so ashamed of saying it that Nathan had to turn away and put the hat back on and start walking, because he had a feeling if he looked at her one more second, one of them was going to break, and he wasn't sure it'd be her. She walked beside him after that. Not close, but beside. Coal Ridge Ranch had a bunkhouse with 4 men in it, a barn with a bad roof, a kitchen that smelled like coffee and old grease, and a debt of $1,140 due at the First Territorial Bank of Bitter Creek on the 1st of April. Nathan brought her through the kitchen door and everything in the room stopped. Old Silas at the stove. Toby, 19, with his mouth full. Hattie Pruitt, the cook, 60 years old, and built like a fence post, who had worked for Nathan's mother and had opinions about everything and everyone in a 100-mile radius. 4 sets of eyes went to Clara. Clara did something Nathan didn't expect. She lifted her chin and looked right back at them, not friendly, not afraid, like a person walking to a gallows who decided to walk there straight. "This is Miss Whitmore," Nathan said. "She'll eat and she'll warm up." Silence. Then Toby said, "Whitmore." And Clara closed her eyes. Nathan saw it, that one word, her own name, landing on her like a slap. "Whitmore, like the Whitmores," Toby said. "Like this Toby." Nathan's voice didn't rise. It never did. That's what made men stop. "Get the lady a plate." "But Mr. Cole, my uncle and Helena said—" "I don't care what your uncle and Helena said. He said they took folks' money. He said there was a whole thing in the paper. There was a—" "Toby." Hattie put down her spoon. "Get the plate or get out." Toby got the plate. Clara sat. She didn't eat. She held the fork and stared at the potatoes like she was doing arithmetic on them. And then she set the fork down and said very carefully to nobody, "He's right, you know." The room went quiet again. "Toby's uncle," Clara said. "He's right. It was in the paper. 4 papers, actually. 2 in Helena, 1 in Denver, 1 in Chicago. I could tell you the dates." "Miss Whitmore," Nathan started. "No, let me. Let me do it now so we don't do it later." She looked up and her eyes were dry and terrible. "My father's name was Edward Whitmore. 3 years ago, they said he stole from people who trusted him. Widows, church funds, a school teacher's pension. They said he took it all and hid it, and I helped him hide it. They said I signed papers. They said I smiled at people in parlors and took their money out of their hands while I was smiling." Hattie set her rag down. "So there it is," Claire said. "That's the whole story, and you didn't even have to wait a week for it. Now you can throw me out with a clear conscience, and I'll thank you for the potatoes." Nobody moved. Nathan said, "Did you?" Clara blinked. "Did I what?" "Take the money." And Clara Whitmore, who had rehearsed 100 answers to 100 cruelties, who had a shield built for every weapon she'd ever been shot with, sat there with her mouth open and nothing came out. Because in 3 years, nobody had asked her, not one person, not one lawyer, not one neighbor, not one friend, not one man on a train. They had all told her, but not one of them had ever once asked. "No," she whispered. "All right," Nathan said, and picked up his coffee. That's it," Claire said. "That's all you're going to—" "You said no, I heard you." Nathan drank. "Eat your supper." "You don't know me." "That's true." "I could be lying." "That's true too." "Then why?" "Because if you're lying," Nathan said, "then all I lost is a plate of potatoes. And if you ain't lying and I threw you out in the snow anyway, then I lost something I can't get back, and neither could you." He set the cup down. "The arithmetic ain't hard, Miss Whitmore. Folks just don't like doing it." Old Silas, who had not said a word, made a small sound in his throat and turned back to the stove. And Hattie Pruitt looked at Clara for a long, long moment. Then she took Clara's plate away, scraped it off, and gave her a fresh one, hot twice as full. "Cold food's an insult," Hattie said to no one. "Whatever else this house is, it ain't insulting." Clara ate. She ate like a person who had not eaten in 2 days, which she hadn't, and halfway through, she started crying without any noise at all, just water running down her face while her hand kept moving the fork, and every man at that table found something fascinating to look at on the far wall until she was done. She was gone by 3 in the morning. Nathan found the note on the kitchen table. 4 words. You were kind, sorry. He was on the horse in 6 minutes. He caught up to her at the gate, the big crossbar gate at the end of the ranch road, the one his father built, and she was standing under it with the suitcase in both arms. Not walking, just standing. Miss Whitmore, go back. You're at my gate. That's still my gate. Then I'll stand on the other side of it. She didn't move. Go back, Mr. Cole. Nathan got down off the horse. Why are you standing here? I'm leaving. You've been standing at this gate a while. There's a lot of snow on your shoulders. That ain't leaving. That's standing. I'm about to leave. Then leave. Clara didn't move. Miss Whitmore, Nathan said quietly, why are you standing at my gate at 3 a.m? And she said in the smallest voice he'd ever heard out of a grown person, because it's warm behind me. Nathan closed his eyes. And I have never once in my life, Clara said, had anything warm behind me that didn't cost more than I could pay. So I'm standing here trying to work out the price. That's all. That's all I'm doing. I've been standing here an hour trying to figure out what you want because everybody wants something and I can't find it, and that scares me worse than the cold. I don't want anything. Everybody wants something. Then here's what I want. Nathan took a step closer, and she didn't flinch this time, and he noticed. I want somebody who can read a ledger. Hattie can't, Silas can't, Toby can barely read a menu. I've got a bank in Bitter Creek that's going to take this place off me on the 1st of April, and I've got 6 years of books in a box that I ain't open because every time I look at them, I want to put a bullet through the wall. You said your daddy did figures. You said you signed papers. So you can read and you can count, and that makes you the most useful person on this ranch. I will pay you $8 a month and you're bored. And if you steal from me, I will find out and I will put you on a train myself and never say your name again. Clara stared at him. That's the price, Nathan said. Work, that's it. That's the whole price. Nobody hires a Whitmore to touch their money. Nobody's got as little money to touch you as me. And Clara Whitmore laughed. Guy by ass. It came out of her like something breaking loose, one sharp, shocked, unwilling bark of a laugh, and she clapped her hand over her mouth like she'd cursed in church. Nathan looked at her hand over her mouth. You don't have to do that, he said. Do what? Cover it. Clara lowered her hand very slowly. I forgot I could, she said. The books were worse than he'd said. She had them spread across the kitchen tables at the second morning, 4 candles burning, because the window light wasn't enough, and Hattie kept coming by with coffee and pretending she wasn't looking. Mr. Cole. Nathan. Mr. Cole, Clara said. Who is Amos Deal? Cattle broker. Buys my beef, sells it in Miles City. How long? 6, 7 years. Why? Clara turned the ledger around. Because in 82 he paid you $19 a head. In 83, $18.50. 84, $18. Last year, 16. Market's soft. Mr. Cole in 84, the Chicago yards paid $26 a head. Nathan stopped with his cup halfway up. I read the market pages, Clara said. For 3 years, I read them every week in every town because it was the only thing that made me feel like the woman I used to be. 26, then 24. It never went below 22, not once, not in 4 years. She tapped the page. Amos Deal has been paying you $6 a head under market and telling you the market was soft. 200 head a year, 6 years. The kitchen was very quiet. Do the arithmetic, Clara said. You said folks don't like doing it. Nathan set the cup down, sat down slow like an old man. $7,000, he said. 7,200, Clara said. Give or take. That's Nathan's jaw worked. That's my brother's doctor. That's the roof. That's my mother's. That's everything He stood up so fast the chair went over backwards. Clara was on her feet, just as fast, hands up, back against the wall, and Nathan saw it happen and stopped dead in the middle of his own kitchen, breathing hard. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. I know. You're against the wall. I know, Clara said. My body doesn't know. Give it a minute. Nathan stood there. He picked up the chair. He set it upright very gently and sat back down in it and put both hands flat on the table where she could see them. Better, he said. Clara's shoulders came down about an inch. Yes, she said. And Hattie Pruitt, standing in the doorway with a pot in her hands, watched a thing happen that she would never quite be able to explain to anybody. A big, quiet cowboy sitting down in a chair on purpose, so a woman wouldn't be afraid and the woman noticing. The Wire came on a Thursday. Toby brought it back from town with the flour and he was white as the sack. Mr. Cole, Mr. Cole, there's a fella at the depot been asking after her by name. Nathan didn't look up from the harness. What fella? City fella. Gray coat. Says he said a word I don't remember, it's associate or something. He was showing folks a picture. Now Nathan looked up. A picture of her. Yes, sir. And Mr. Cole, Toby swallowed. Folks recognized her. Miss Ansell at the hotel said she'd turned her away her first night in town. Said she wouldn't have a Whitmore under her roof. And the fella gave Miss Ansell money. He gave her money for saying that. He gave her $5, Toby said, for saying where she went. Nathan put the harness down. He found Clara in the kitchen with her sleeves rolled, and she took one look at his face and stood up, and her chair went back, and she said, "He's here." You know who it is? I know who sends them. Her hands had gone completely steady. That was the worst part, the shaking stopped. How long do I have? Clara. How long, Nathan? He noticed the name. She noticed him noticing. Neither of them said anything about it. Toby says he's at the depot, Nathan said. Depot to here is 2 hours if he's got a horse and knows the road. He don't know the road. 3 hours, Clara said. Then he asked the freight office, and the freight office knows the road, and it's 2 hours. She was already moving, suitcase off the shelf, coat off the peg, moving like a person who had done this before, and Nathan understood with a sick lurch that she had done it before, that this was practiced, that somewhere behind those eyes was a woman who had timed this in other kitchens in other towns. How many times, he said. What? How many times have you packed that bag like that? Clara stopped. 11, she said. Nathan put his hand on the door. Then this is 12, he said, and 12's where it stops. Sit down. Nathan. Sit down. She didn't sit, but she stopped. Here's what I know about men in gray coats, Nathan said. They don't have a gun, and they don't have a badge, and they don't have any right to walk onto another man's land in the Montana Territory. And if he wants you, he can come tell me. Why to my face, and I will listen to every word he's got, and then I will decide. Not Miss Ansell at the hotel, not Toby's uncle in Helena, not 4 newspapers in 3 states. Me, on my land. That's how it works out here. And if that ain't how it worked wherever you been, then wherever you been ain't worth going back to. Clara's mouth opened. But you have to be here, Nathan said. You can't be a rumor down the road, Clara. Rumors lose. People win. You have to stand in my kitchen and be a person. And if he tells you something you can't stand to hear, then I'll hear it standing. Clara set the suitcase down. It was the loudest sound in the room. The man in the gray coat arrived at 4:40 in the afternoon, and he was polite. That was what turned Nathan's stomach. He was so polite. Mr. Cole Marcus Ryle, I represent certain interests in Helena. He didn't get off his horse. He looked at the barn roof while he said it, and Nathan understood that he was pricing it. I'm told you've taken on a housekeeper. I've taken on a bookkeeper. Something moved across Ryle's face. Very small. A bookkeeper, he said. That's right. Mr. Cole, do you know what she is? I know what she does. She does figures. I've had her a week, and she's already found me $7,000. The change in Ryle's face was the size of a pin, and Nathan caught it and filed it away, and would think about it later at 2 in the morning for the rest of his life. She found you $7,000, Ryle repeated. She did. May I ask where you may not? Ryle smiled. Mr. Cole, I'm going to do you a kindness. That woman's father took $81,000 from working people, church people. There's a widow in Helena named Mary Beckwith, 64 years old, scrubs floors now, and she used to own a house. Clara Whitmore sat in Mary Beckwith's parlor and drank her tea and took her signature. That's not a rumor. That's a fact, and it's in the record. Then why ain't she in a jail? Ryle's smile didn't move. I'm sorry. You just described a crime, Nathan said. $81,000 is a big crime. A crime that big, there's a trial, there's a jury, there's 12 men in a box. So where's the jail, Mr. Ryle? Silence. She was never charged, Nathan said. Was she? Charges are a matter for... She was never charged, Nathan said. And you rode 2 hours out here to tell me a story about a woman who was never charged, and you paid $5 for the road. And I want to know what a woman who was never charged is worth to somebody in Helena that they'd pay $5 for a road. Marcus Ryle looked down at Nathan Cole for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "You're a smarter man than they told me." "Who's they?" "Mr. Cole, I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to hear it as a friend." "We ain't friends." "As a neighbor, then. There is a gentleman with an interest in this valley. He's a patient man. He's prepared to be generous. And he would consider it a personal favor if that woman were on a train by Sunday." Ryle reached into his coat. Nathan's hand went to his hip. Ryle's thumb stopped. Slowly, with 2 fingers, he drew out an envelope. $300, he said. "For your trouble." Nathan stared at the envelope. $1,140 due on the 1st of April. $300 right there in a man's hand for doing nothing at all, for doing less than nothing, for simply going back to being the man he'd been 2 weeks ago. Behind him, the kitchen door was open. He knew it was open. He could feel the warm air on the back of his neck. He knew she was standing in it. "Mr. Ryle," Nathan said. "Yes." "You just offered me $300 to put a woman on a train." Nathan's voice was very calm. "You didn't offer me $300 to prove she's a thief. You didn't offer me a document. You didn't offer me a witness. You offered me money to make her disappear." He looked up. "Now, why would an innocent man's errand cost $300 when the truth is free?" The envelope stayed in the air between them. Then Marcus Ryle put it back in his coat and said pleasantly, "Mr. Cole, your note at the 1st Territorial is due April 1st. Nathan didn't move. $1,140, Ryle said. "Isn't that right? It's a matter of public record. I only mention it because notes get sold sometimes. Bought and sold, bank to bank, man to man. Happens every day. A fellow can wake up owing a stranger." He turned his horse. "Good evening. Give my regards to Miss Whitmore. Tell her Helena remembers her fondly." He rode off down the ranch road at a walk. Nathan stood in the yard until the sound was gone. Then he turned around. Clara was in the doorway. She had heard all of it. Her face was the color of paper. $300, she said. "Yeah." "Nathan, do you understand what that is? That's 1/3 of your note in one envelope for one signature, and I'm not worth Clara. I'm not worth $300. Nobody's worth Clara." "What?" "You just called me Nathan," he said. "Twice." She stopped. And then Clara Whitmore put her face in her hands and cried, standing up in a doorway, the way people cry when they've been holding something for 3 years and their arms finally give out. And Nathan Cole stood there in the cold with his hat in his hands and didn't touch her because he'd learned by then and let her have it. That night she told him. Some of it. They sat at the table with the candles down to stubs, and Hattie in the next room being loudly asleep, and Clara talked with her hands wrapped around a cup she never drank from. "My father wasn't a thief," she said. "My father was a fool, which is worse because a thief knows what he's doing." She turned the cup a half inch. "He was a broker. He handled accounts for people who trusted him because he was from a good family, and he went to the right church, and he never raised his voice. And there was a man who came to him with a proposition. Water rights, land along a river up in this territory, and a plan to buy it quiet section by section before anybody knew what it was worth." Nathan's coffee stopped moving. "My father raised the money," Clara said. $81,000. Mary Beckwith's house money was in it. The church fund was in it. And every single dollar was raised legally in daylight with signatures and receipts and my father's name on all of it because he believed the man. And the man took the money and bought the land in his own name, Clara said. All of it, every section. And when the investors came asking, there was no partnership on paper. There was no company. There was nothing. Just $81,000 gone and one broker's signature on every page. Your father's. My father's. Clara finally looked up. And mine. Because I was 23 years old and I was proud of him. And I sat in those parlors and I witnessed those signatures with my own hand, and I told Mary Beckwith it was safe, Nathan. I looked at a 64-year-old woman in her own parlor, and I told her it was safe, and she patted my hand and said, "I know it is dear because you're such a good girl." Nathan put his cup down. "That's the part," Clara said. "That's the whole part. That's why I say I'm different. Because you keep looking at me like I'm somebody who got hurt, and I'm not. I'm somebody who did it. I didn't know I was doing it, but that doesn't matter to Mary Beckwith. She scrubs floors either way. My not knowing doesn't put one board back in her house. Her voice went flat and dead. So when I say don't get close to me, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. Everything I touched turned to ruin, and I touched it with a smile, and the smile is the part I can't. She stopped. Say it, Nathan said. The smile is the part I can't forgive. The candle guttered. Your father, Nathan said. Where is he? Clara didn't answer. Clara, where's your father? He shot himself, she said in April of '83, in his office, and he left a letter, and the letter said the name of the man, and the letter was in his hand when I found him. And by the time the sheriff arrived, the letter was gone. Nathan's whole body went cold. Gone. Somebody took it out of a dead man's hand, Clara said. In the 11 minutes it took me to run for help. And when I told the sheriff there'd been a letter, he looked at me the way people look at me now. And he said, Miss Whitmore, that's convenient. She lifted the cup finally, drank, set it down. So that's what I am, she said. I'm a woman with no proof of a letter I read with my own eyes. And every year it gets a little less real. Some nights I lie there and I think maybe there wasn't a letter. Maybe I made it up because I couldn't stand it. That's what they've done to me, Nathan. They didn't just take my name. They got in behind my eyes and made me doubt what I saw. You saw it. You don't know that. You saw it, Nathan said. You told me the number of minutes. 11. Nobody remembers 11 minutes about a thing they made up. Made up things are round. Made up things are a little while. You said 11. Clara stared at him. You've counted them, Nathan said. Every night for 3 years you've counted those 11 minutes and tried to fit a thief into them. Ain't that so? Her mouth trembled. Yes, she said. Then it happened. That's not, she laughed, wet and broken. That's not evidence, Nathan. That's not a court. Ain't a court in this kitchen, Nathan said. Just me. And I'm telling you what I believe, and I'm telling you out loud so you can hear a human voice say it, because I don't think you've heard one in 3 years. Clara covered her mouth again. Then deliberately, like it cost her everything, and she took her hand away and left it on the table. Say it again, she whispered. I believe you. Again. I believe you, Clara. She nodded, just kept nodding, a dozen small nods staring at the table. Maybe the world gave up on you, Nathan said. That don't mean you get to give up on yourself. The world's have been wrong before. The world thought this valley was worthless. The world thinks I'm a fool. The world is a whole lot of people who were somewhere else when the thing happened, and I'll be damned if I'll let a crowd of people who weren't there tell me what I'm looking at. And Clara Whitmore, who had been called a liar in 4 newspapers in 11 towns, put her head down on Nathan Cole's kitchen table and wept like a child, and he sat with her until the candle went out and never once touched her and never once left. She started laughing that week. Small things at first. Toby fell off the corral fence and she laughed. Hattie called the bank president a word that Nathan pretended not to hear, and she laughed. And every time she caught herself and her hand started up toward her mouth, every time she made herself put it back down. Nathan watched her do it. He never said anything. But Hattie did. Hattie cornered him in the barn. You know what you're doing, fixing a hinge. Don't be stupid with me. Nathan Cole, I've known you since you had no teeth. Hattie folded her arms. That girl's been in this house 11 days and I've watched her stop flinching. You know how long it takes a body to stop flinching years. She did it in 11 days. You know why? No. Because she's decided you're safe, Hattie said. And a person only decides that once, boy. Once. And if you're wrong about her or she's wrong about you, that ain't a disappointment. That's a killing. Nathan kept working the hinge. I ain't wrong, he said. Your daddy said that about the deal contract. The screwdriver stopped. That's low, Hattie. That's true, she said. And true's allowed to be low. She started for the door, then stopped. For the record, I like her. I like her more than I've liked anybody in this house since your mother. That's exactly why I'm scared. You don't get scared about people you don't like. They rode to Bitter Creek on the 9th of March because the bank wanted a conversation, and because Nathan had decided something. I want you in that room, he said. Nathan, no. Nobody in that town will. That's exactly why. You'll lose the extension. Maybe. You'll lose the ranch. Maybe. Then why? She demanded. Give me one reason that makes sense. Because you're my bookkeeper, Nathan said, and a man brings his bookkeeper to the bank. That's the reason. That's the whole reason. It ain't a speech, Clara. It's just true, and I'm sick to death of watching true things get bent because somebody's uncle and Helena read a newspaper. They walked into the first territorial and the room went silent in exactly the way Clara had known it would since she was 6 years old and learned what a room sounds like when it stops. Miss Ansell from the hotel was at the teller window. She turned around, she looked at Clara, and she said out loud to the whole room, "Well, I see the coal place has lowered its standards." Clara didn't move. Nathan did. He took off his hat. "Miss Ansell," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of that bank, "you took $5 from a stranger to tell him where a woman slept." The silence changed temperature. That's not... Toby Wills watched you do it. So did Ed Marsh at the freight office, and so did the boy that sweeps the depot. Nathan turned his hat in his hands slow. Now, I don't know what Miss Whitmore did or didn't do 3 years ago in Helena. I wasn't there. Neither were you. But I know exactly what you did, Miss Ansell, 8 days ago on a Thursday for $5. He put the hat back on. So if we're lowering standards in here today, let's lower them together. Nobody in that bank said one word. And Clara Whitmore stood in the middle of it and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years and couldn't name for almost a minute. It was her spine. Mr. Holloway, the bank president, took them into the back and closed the door and did not offer them chairs. "Nathan, April 1st, 1140. I know it. You've got 400 in the account and 200 head that ain't worth what they were." Holloway shuffled paper. "I'll be plain. I can't carry you. You carried my father 11 years. Your father had contracts." "So do I," Nathan said. "That's what I come to talk about. Amos Deal's been paying me 6 under market for 6 years, and I've got a woman here who can prove it on paper, and if I take Deal to court..." "Nathan," Holloway's voice was strange. "Sit down. You didn't offer us a chair. Sit down anyway." Something in the room had shifted, and Clara felt it before Nathan did. She had spent 3 years learning to smell it. The change in a man's voice right before he tells you the ground is gone. Holloway opened a drawer. He took out a single sheet of paper and laid it on the desk and turned it around, and he could not look at Nathan while he did it. "Your note was sold," he said, "on the 28th of February. Nathan didn't move. "Sold," he said. "Banks do it. It's ordinary. It's Nathan, I fought it. I want you to know that I fought it." "Sold to who?" Holloway's hand stayed flat on the paper. "Who Holloway?" The bank president slid the paper across the desk, and Nathan Cole looked down at it, and the name on the assignment line was a name he did not know, a company name, 3 words, and an ampersand meaningless as fog. And he was still reading it, still trying to make it mean something when he heard the sound behind him. A small sound, like a person's breath going out and not coming back. He turned. Clara was staring at the paper. She had gone the color of ash. Her hand had come up to her throat to the place where a necklace used to be, and her lips had parted and she was not breathing. And Nathan had seen that face exactly once before on a man who'd been kicked by a horse and hadn't started hurting yet. "Clara." She didn't hear him. "Clara, what is it? Do you know that name?" And Clara Whitmore said in a voice like a door closing at the far end of a very long hall, "I've seen that signature before." "Where?" She looked up at him. "In my father's hand," she said. "In the letter, the one that disappeared." Holloway was the first one to move. He put his hand flat on the paper like a man covering a card. "Miss Whitmore, that's an assignment of note. That's a bank instrument. There's nothing on it but a company name and a filing date." "There's a signature," Clara said. "There's an agent's mark." "There's a signature," Clara said, "and I have seen it before, and I saw it in a room where a man I loved was lying dead on the floor, and I am not going to be told by you, sir, on this day that I did not see what I saw." Holloway's face did something Nathan had never seen it do in 20 years of borrowing money from him. It came apart. "Give her the paper," Nathan said. "Nathan, give her the paper bill. It's bank property." "Then hold it," Nathan said, "and let her look." Holloway held it. Clara didn't touch it. She bent over that desk with her hands behind her back, like a woman at a museum, and she looked at 1 inch of ink for what felt like a year, and her breath went in and out 3 times, and then she straightened up. The H, she said. What about it? He crosses it. Clara's voice had gone strange and quiet. There's no crossbar in a capital H. There's only 2 uprights and a bar, that's the whole letter. But he crosses the bar again on the way out. It's a flourish. He does it without thinking. He does it because a schoolmaster in Baltimore made him practice 100 pages of copperplate when he was 9 years old, and he never stopped. She looked up. My father called it his signature inside his signature. My father said, that man is so proud he signs his name twice. Holloway didn't say anything. Bill, Nathan said, who bought my note? I can't disclose. Who bought my note? A company. Who's the company? Nathan, I've got a wife. And that was the sentence that told Nathan everything. He heard it land. He watched Holloway hear himself say it. The 2 of them stood there with that sentence between them, like a dead thing on the table, and Nathan felt something cold go up the back of his neck, because Bill Holloway had loaned him money at his mother's funeral and had cried doing it, and Bill Holloway was not a coward. Somebody scared you, Nathan said. Holloway put the paper back in the drawer. He shut the drawer. He turned the key. April 1st, he said, 1140, whoever holds it. Bill, April 1st, Nathan. Clara was already at the door. She got 20 feet down the boardwalk before Nathan caught her, and she was walking fast, and she was talking, and it took him a second to realize she wasn't talking to him. 11 days, she was saying. 11 days, that's all it took. That's a record. That's the fastest yet. Clara, usually I get 4 months. I got 4 months in Cheyenne. I got almost a year in Sioux Falls. Clara, stop. She stopped so suddenly he almost ran into her, and she turned around and her face was the face of a person doing arithmetic at a funeral. Nathan, she said, I have to be on the eastbound tomorrow. No. He bought your note. I know what he did. He bought your note, Nathan. That's not a threat. That's not a man in a gray coat with an envelope that's done. That's a piece of paper in a drawer with your whole life on it and his name on the back, and he did it 3 weeks before he ever set eyes on me out here. Do you understand what that means? It means it was never about me. It means he was already coming for you, and I just made it personal. Nathan stood very still. Say that again, he said. He was already. The dates. Nathan's voice had changed. Say the dates. Clara blinked. Holloway said the 28th of February, and Ryle came out to the place on the 6th of March. Yes. So on the 28th of February, Nathan said slowly, a man in Helena bought $1,140 of my debt, and 6 days later he sent another man 2 hours out into a snowstorm to offer me $300 to put you on a train. He looked at her. Clara, if he already owned me, why'd he pay? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. He already had the gun to my head, Nathan said. He didn't need the $300. He didn't need to bribe me. He could have just waited till April and taken the whole place legal and never said your name out loud once. He took a breath. But he wanted you gone first, before April, before anything. He wanted you off this land bad enough to pay $300 he didn't have to pay to a man he already owned. Clara's hand came up to her throat again. That empty place. Why, she whispered. That, Nathan said, is the first question anybody's asked in 3 years that's worth a damn. She didn't sleep that night, and neither did he, and at some point past 2, they were both in the kitchen again, without either one admitting they'd come looking. I want you to say his name, Nathan said. I can't. Clara, I can't. Nathan, that's not stubbornness, that's... She pressed her palms against the table. 3 years ago, I said his name to a sheriff and a judge and 2 lawyers and a newspaper man, and every single one of them wrote it down, and every single one of them came back a week later and looked at me like I'd spit on their mother. Everyone. Every single time. I say the name and something in the room turns. I've watched it happen so many times I can feel it coming like weather. She laughed and there was nothing in it. So no, I'm not putting it in your kitchen. I like your kitchen. Nathan reached over and took the pencil out of her ledger and slid the paper toward her. Then don't say it, he said. Write it. Clara looked at the pencil for a long time. Then she picked it up and wrote 7 letters and turned the paper around and put both hands in her lap like a woman who'd just set down something burning. Nathan read it. He read it again. And Clara watched his face, waiting for the turn, the thing she'd learned to feel coming like weather. And it didn't come. What came instead was worse. What came was Nathan Cole going absolutely still, the way a man goes still when he hears a rattle in the grass and hasn't found it yet. "Nathan Hawthorne," he said. "You know him?" "No." "Nathan, your face." "I don't know him," Nathan said, "but I have heard that name in this house before." He was staring past her at the wall. "My father said it once. I was maybe 22, 23. There was a man came out here to see him about the river, and they were in this kitchen for 2 hours, and I was in the barn, and when the man left, my daddy came out and sat down on a bucket and didn't say anything for an hour." "What did he say when he said it?" "He said a fella named Hawthorne came about the water. And nothing." Nathan's jaw worked. "That's all he ever said. My whole life. That's it. That's the whole sentence. And Clara, my father talked. That man talked about everything. He talked about weather for 40 minutes. He told the same 3 stories about the war till I could say 'em in my sleep." He looked up. "So why is that the one thing he never finished?" Clara sat back very slowly. "When was that?" she asked. 79, 80, somewhere in there. That's 3 years before my father ever met him." "Yeah," Nathan said, "it is." And Clara Whitmore, who had spent 3 years believing she was standing at the center of the worst thing that had ever happened to anybody, felt the floor of it drop out because it hadn't started with her father. It hadn't started with her. She'd been standing in the middle of a story that was already old when she got there. And all this time she'd been apologizing for the whole thing like she'd built it herself. "Nathan," she said, "how much of your land touches that river?" "Every foot of the north section." "And who owns the north section?" Nathan's mouth opened. Then he stood up and went out the door without his coat on, and Clara heard him crossing the yard at a dead run in the dark. And when he came back 11 minutes later, he had a wooden box in his arms with his mother's handwriting on the lid, and there was snow melting in his hair, and he set it on the table and said one word: "Read." She read until sunrise. Hattie found them there at 6, Clara with her sleeves shoved up in ink on 2 fingers. Nathan sitting across from her with his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold 3 hours ago, and the whole table covered in paper. "What in God's name?" "Deeds," Clara said without looking up. "Deeds, patents, water filings, tax receipts, and 41 letters." "For what?" "For the north section." Clara turned a page. "Hattie, sit down." "I don't sit." "Sit down, Hattie." Hattie sat down. "Nathan's father filed on the north section in 1871, Clara said. "Homestead patent 160 acres signed by the land office in Helena. That's the river frontage. That's where the water comes onto this place." She slid a page across. "In 1879, a man offered to buy it. Cash. Nathan's father said no." "Well, of course he said no." "In 1880, the offer came again. Higher." Clara's voice was very level, the way a voice gets when a person is holding something down with both hands. "In 1881, the county reassessed this ranch. The tax on Coal Ridge went from $31 a year to $180. Hattie's head came up. "6 times, Clara said, "in 1 year on land that hadn't changed." That ain't right. That's..." "In 1882, the deal contract starts." Clara pulled a paper out. "Amos deal, $16 to $19 a head, 6 under market, every year." And Nathan looked at the date on the first deal contract. Nathan looked. "March," he said. "March of 82, 2 months after the tax went up 6 times. Clara set the paper down very gently, like it might go off. "Do you see it? Say it." "They didn't try to buy this land," Clara said. "They tried to buy it twice, and your father said no twice, and so they stopped trying to buy it. They started starving it. Tax it till he needs money. Buy his beef under market so he never gets the money. Wait, just wait. 10 years if they have to, and one day the man's dead, and the son's got a note at the bank and a barn roof he can't fix, and then you don't buy the land at all. You just pick it up off the floor." The kitchen was completely silent. Then Hattie Pruitt said in a voice Nathan had never heard from her, "Your daddy knew." Nathan didn't move. "Boy, your daddy knew." Hattie's eyes had gone red. "That's why he sat on that bucket. That's why he wouldn't say. 14 years he carried that and never told a soul, and I fed that man breakfast every day of it." Why wouldn't he tell me? Nathan said. Because you'd have gone to Helena with a rifle, Hattie said, and you'd have hung for it, and he'd have lost the only thing he had left. That's why. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand, furious about it. He didn't keep it from you because he didn't trust you. He kept it from you because he knew you. Nathan sat there. Clara watched him and understood with a sick certainty that she was looking at a man who had just found out that his entire life, every hungry winter, every dollar short, every year of thinking, I'm not as good at this as my father was, had been engineered by somebody in an office 200 miles away who had never once shaken his hand. Nathan, she said. He didn't answer. Nathan, look at me. I'm all right. You're not all right. You've gone gray as a fish. 22 years, Nathan said. What? I was 22 when that man came about the water. I've spent 16 years since then thinking I was a bad rancher. His voice was perfectly even, and that was the worst part. I've stood in that yard and looked at these books and thought my daddy could make this work, and I can't, so the problem's me. He looked up at her. Clara, the problem was never me. No, she said, it wasn't. And you've spent 3 years thinking the problem was you. Clara's mouth opened. That's his trick, Nathan said quietly. That's the whole trick. That's the only thing he does. He don't beat people. He gets inside them and makes them beat themselves, and then he stands back and lets them finish the job for free. And Clara Whitmore put her hand over her mouth, and this time it wasn't shame. It was the sound she made when she finally got angry. Toby broke on a Tuesday. He'd been strange for a week, jumpy as a colt, and he dropped a bucket in the barn and burst out crying like a kid half his age, and Hattie hauled him into the kitchen by the collar and stood him in front of Nathan and said, tell him. Mr. Cole, tell him what you told me. Mr. Cole, I wrote my uncle. Toby's face was purple. I wrote him about her 2 weeks ago. I told him she was here, and I told him she was doing the books, and I told him about the $7,000 and about Mr. Deal. Clara went white. Toby, Nathan said, I didn't mean nothing by it. He's my uncle. He's been asking after me for a year. I just wanted somebody to know I was doing good. I just wanted to have something to say. Toby was hiccuping now. And then he wrote back and he asked more. He asked what she found in the books. He asked, was she leaving? And Mr. Cole, my uncle, don't write to me. He ain't wrote me since I was 14. He wrote me back in 9 days. The room went cold. 9 days, Clara said. Yes'm. Toby, how long does mail take from here to Helena? 6 days each way, Toby said miserably. That's 12. Clara looked at Nathan. He didn't write it from Helena, she said. Toby stopped crying all at once the way a person does when the thing they were afraid of turns out to be a smaller animal standing in front of a much bigger one. Where's your Uncle Liv's son? Nathan said. Helena. He's lived in Helena my whole... Where's the letter? Toby got the letter. Nathan read it, and then Clara read it, and Clara read it twice, and then she turned it over and held it up to the window and said, it's the same paper. What? It's the same paper as Ryle's card. She was already moving to the shelf. It's the same stock, Nathan. It's got a rag content you don't get out of a general store. Feel the corner. Miss Whitmore, my uncle wouldn't... Toby's voice cracked. My uncle's a good man. He works at the courthouse. He's a clerk. He's been a clerk 20 years. And Clara stopped dead in the middle of the floor. He's a what? She said. He's a clerk at the courthouse in Helena. Clara turned around very slowly. Toby, she said, what's your uncle's name? Edward Wills. Which courthouse? There's only one. Which department, Toby? Records, Toby said. He does records. Deeds and filings and miss. Why are you looking at me like that? Clara sat down. She had to. Her legs quit. Nathan, she said, the man who took my father's letter out of his hand had 11 minutes and a key to the room. And every single document that came out at the inquest, every partnership paper that wasn't there, every filing that had my father's name and nobody else's, every one of those came out of the records office in Helena, certified, stamped by a clerk. She looked up at Toby, and there was nothing cruel in her face which somehow made it worse. Honey, your uncle didn't take $5 to tell a man where I slept. Your uncle's been getting paid for 6 years. Toby stood there in the middle of the kitchen with his hat in both hands and started to shake. He sent me here, he said. Nobody answered him. He sent me here. Toby's voice went up. He got me this job. He wrote Mr. Cole a letter about me when I was 17, and Mr. Cole didn't even want a hand that year. He said he couldn't feed another mouth, and Uncle Ed wrote him twice. He looked at Nathan with the most terrible face Nathan had ever seen on a boy. Mr. Cole, was I? And Nathan Cole crossed that kitchen and put both hands on Toby Wills's shoulders. Look at me, he said, you didn't know. I told him everything, Toby, look at me. Nathan waited until the boy's eyes came up. You want to know how I know? You didn't know because you're standing in my kitchen telling me. A man who knew would have kept his mouth shut and let this play out and been gone by April with money in his pocket. You came in here and cried in front of your boss and a woman you're sweet on and old Hattie who's going to make your life hell about it for 10 years. He shook him once gently. That's not what a spy does, son. That's what a decent man does when he finds out he's been used. Now stop apologizing and go feed the horses, and don't you dare quit on me because I need every hand I've got. Toby went out. Hattie waited until the door shut. That was your daddy talking, she said. I know it, Nathan said and sat down and his hands were shaking and he put them under the table. Richard Hawthorne came to Coal Ridge on the 21st of March and he came in daylight and he came alone and he knocked. That was the thing Clara would never get out of her head afterward. He knocked. Nathan opened the door and there was a man on the step, 60 years old, hat in his hands, snow on his shoulders, smiling the way a good uncle smiles. Mr. Cole, I've come a long way and I'd take a cup of coffee if you've got one to spare. I'm Richard Hawthorne. Nathan stood in the doorway of his own house and could not make his body do anything. I understand you may have heard the name, Hawthorne said kindly. I understand it may have been said unkindly. I'd like the chance to sit at your table like a man and be heard. And if you'd rather not, I'll put my hat back on and ride 2 hours in the cold and I won't hold it against you for 1 minute. And Nathan, because he was his father's son, because there was a thing built into him at the bone that could not leave a man on a step, said, come in. Clara was at the table. Hawthorne saw her and his whole face opened up and he said, Clara, like her father used to, exactly like her father used to. Clara did not stand and did not speak and did not blink, and Nathan watched every drop of color leave her face in the space of 1 second and thought with a violence that surprised him, I will kill this man in this kitchen. Oh, child, Hawthorne said, and his voice broke. It actually broke. Oh, child, I have looked for you for 3 years. Sit down, Mr. Hawthorne, Nathan said. He sat. He set his hat on his knee. He looked around the kitchen with a kind of wonder and said, your mother's stove. I remember your mother's stove. And Nathan felt the room tilt. Say what you came to say. I came to say, I'm sorry, Hawthorne said. Silence. For which part? Clara said. Her voice came out flat and dead and it startled all of them, including her. For all of it, sweetheart. Don't. For all of it, Hawthorne said, and I'll take it in pieces if you'd rather. I'm sorry your father died. I'm sorry I wasn't in Helena that April. I'm sorry that when it all came down, the papers had his name on them and not mine. And Clara, I have never once in 3 years been able to explain that to anybody's satisfaction, including my own. He turned his hat. Your father and I had a handshake. That's all it ever was. 2 men and a handshake. And I have thought 1,000 times if I'd made him sign one piece of paper, one he'd be alive. Clara's hands had gone white on the table edge. That's good, she said. Sweetheart. No, I mean it, that's good. She laughed once. I've been hearing you for 3 years, in courtrooms and parlors and newspapers, and I always wondered what you'd sound like up close, and now I know, and it's good. It's very good. If I'd been anywhere but that room, I'd believe you. Hawthorne's eyes filled. They actually filled. And Clara watched a 60-year-old man's eyes fill with tears over her dead father and felt the exact thing she'd felt in Mary Beckwith's parlor, with a pen in her hand, the terrible, warm, dead certain feeling of being in the presence of somebody kind, and understood all the way down that she had never had a single instinct in her life worth trusting. Mr. Hawthorne, Nathan said, you bought my note. I did. Clara's head came around. Say that again, Nathan said. I bought your note, Mr. Cole, on the 28th of February, $1,140 from the 1st Territorial at par. Hawthorne met his eyes. I'll say it plainer. I own your debt. I'll say it plainer still on April 1st if you don't pay me. I take this ranch and I will do it and I'll sleep. Nobody had expected that. Nathan actually sat down. You're not going to lie about it, he said. Mr. Cole, I have been lied about so thoroughly for 3 years that I've lost the taste for it entirely. Hawthorne's voice didn't rise. I want that river. I've wanted it for 16 years. I offered your father cash twice and he told me no, and he was right to. It's worth 10 times what I offered, and he knew it, and I respected him for it more than he ever knew. I've been patient. I'm still being patient, and I'm not going to sit at a man's table and pretend I'm here about anything else. Then why are you here? Because I'd rather buy it than take it, Hawthorne said. And there it was. $9,000, he said, today, for the north section. You keep your house, you keep your cattle, you keep your name. You pay off every debt you've got with 1,100 of it, and you've got 7,900 left over, which is, forgive me, more money than this ranch has cleared in 20 years. He let it sit. Or I wait 9 days and take all of it for 1,140. And Mr. Cole, I want you to hear this because it's the only honest thing anybody's going to say to you this month. Both of those are legal. One of them makes you rich. One of them makes you a hired man. Nathan didn't move. $9,000, Hattie said from the doorway in a voice like she'd been hit. Ma'am, that's Nathan. That's the roof. That's the herd. That's Hattie. That's your life, boy. Hattie, go outside. Hattie went outside. And Nathan Cole sat across from a smiling old man who had just offered him in one sentence everything he had wanted since he was 22 years old, and understood that he was not being robbed. He was being bought, and that it would be so easy, and that nobody in the world would ever say a word against him for it. Why now? Clara said. Hawthorne turned to her. Sweetheart, you waited 16 years. Clara's voice was very quiet. You waited out a man's whole life. You had 9 more days, and you'd have had it all for free. And instead you rode 2 hours in the cold to hand him $9,000 he'd never have gotten otherwise. She tilted her head. That's not patience, Mr. Hawthorne. That's panic. The room changed temperature. It was so small. Nathan almost missed it. Hawthorne's thumb stopped moving on the brim of his hat. You want it closed, Clara said. Not taken. Closed. You want a signature and a date and a filing because a foreclosure goes through a court, and a court has a record, and a record can be looked at. And Mr. Hawthorne, you have never in your life let anything be looked at. Clara, I found the deal contracts. Hawthorne's face did not move. $6 a head under market for 6 years, Clara said. $7,200. And the county reassessment of 1881 6 times in 1 year on unimproved land. And a records clerk in Helena named Edward Wills, who's been writing to a 19-year-old boy in this bunkhouse for 2 years asking what I've been reading. She leaned forward 1 inch. That's not a rumor. That's not a woman crying in a courtroom. That's paper, sir. That's 4 kinds of paper in 4 different offices with 4 different men's names on it, and every one of them leads to a 5th man, and I have his handwriting. Nobody breathed. And then Richard Hawthorne smiled warm, sad, wide, and said, Clara, honey, do you know what a jury does with paper that's been in the hands of a Whitmore? And there it was, 4 seconds. That's how long it took. There she is, Clara said softly. I beg your pardon. There you are. She sat back. I've been waiting 3 years to see your face. That's it. That's the whole face. It took 4 seconds. Hawthorne stood up. He put his hat on. He nodded to Nathan, perfectly pleasant, and at the door he turned around and said the thing that Clara would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life. Mr. Cole, he said, ask her about the necklace. And he left. Nathan stood in his kitchen with his heart going like a hammer and did not turn around for a full 10 seconds because he knew that whatever was behind him was the whole rest of his life. Then he turned around. Clara was standing with her back against the wall and both hands flat against it, and she was not breathing, and she said, don't. Clara. Nathan, don't, please don't. I'm not asking, Nathan said. She looked up. I'm not asking you, he said. You hear me? I'm not going to be the 4th man this week who asks you to prove yourself in your own house. He wanted me to ask. That's why he said it on his way out the door. He said it at the door, Clara, so I'd have to carry it around all night, and I'm not going to carry it, and neither are you. He put his hat on the table. So I'm going to go fix the corral. And when you want to tell me, you tell me. And if you never want to tell me, then I will die not knowing, and it will not cost me 1 hour of sleep. He got to the door. It was Mary Beckwith's, Clara said. Nathan stopped. She gave it to me, Clara said. 2 days before, in her parlor. She put it in my hand and closed my fingers over it, and she said, "This was my mother's, and I never had a daughter, and you've been so good to me." Her voice was absolutely steady, which is how Nathan knew how bad it was. It's not worth anything. It's plated. It's worth maybe $1. And 2 days later, her house money was gone, and I sat in a hotel room in Denver, and I took it out and I looked at it, and I could not, Nathan, I could not make myself throw it away, and I could not make myself send it back, because sending it back meant writing her a letter, and I could not write that woman a letter. So you kept it. I've worn it every day for 3 years, Clara said, because I don't get to put it down. That's the whole arrangement. Every morning I put it on, and I remember that a good woman scrubs floors because she trusted my face. That's not a keepsake, Nathan. That's a sentence. I'm serving it. Nathan came back into the room. "And the chain," he said. "Who broke the chain?" Clara's mouth twisted. "A man in Denver," she said. "In the street. He recognized me from the paper, and he tore it off my neck, and he threw it in the mud, and he said, 'You don't get to wear nice things.' And he was right." She looked up, and finally, her voice cracked. "He was right, Nathan. That's the thing nobody understands. Every one of them's a little bit right. That's why I can't fight it. How do you fight something that's a little bit right?" And Nathan Cole said, "You don't fight it, you pay it." She stared at him. "Not to him," Nathan said. "Not to a newspaper, not to a jury, not to a man in a street in Denver. You owe those people nothing. You owe one person on this earth, and her name is Mary Beckwith, and she's alive, and she's 67 years old, and she's in Helena scrubbing floors." He picked up the necklace off the shelf where it had sat for a month. "And you have been paying her in misery for 3 years, Clara. Misery ain't money. Misery don't put one board back in her house. You've been serving a sentence that don't help her one bit, and I'd bet you everything I own that woman would rather have $40 and an honest letter than your whole life." Clara's face came apart. I know. Nathan, I can't face her." "I know," he said, "but you can beat the man who did it to both of you, and that I think she'd take." Clara stood there with her hands over her face and shook, and then she took them down and said, "Then I need the deed." "What?" "The north section." She was already moving and already at the box, already pulling paper. "Nathan, he offered $9,000 for 160 acres. That's $56 an acre for grass. Grass runs 3 to 5. He's not buying grass, and he's not buying water. Either water's worth maybe 20. Nathan, what's under it?" "There's nothing under it. It's a river." "There's something under it, or he wouldn't have waited 16 years. She spread the deeds across the table. "Where's the survey? Every patent's got a survey. Where's the She stopped. Nathan watched her stop. He would remember later that she went silent before she went pale, that the sound left her first. Clara. She had a paper in her hand, not one of the deeds, something folded in behind them in the back of the box, soft with handling older. "What is it?" She didn't answer. "Clara, what is it?" "It's a plat," she said. "It's a survey plat of the north section, filed with the land office at Helena." Her voice had gone very far away. "And there's a certification stamp on the back. There always is. Every certified copy's got a stamp and a date and a clerk's initials. So it's dated the 9th of June, 1883, Clara said. Nathan didn't understand. "That's after," he said slowly. That's 2 months after my father died," Clara said, "and 11 weeks after my name was in 4 newspapers, and this piece of paper has been sitting in your dead mother's box in your barn for 3 years. She turned it over. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Nathan, why does your father have a certified survey of his own land, pulled from a records office 200 miles away, dated 8 weeks after Edward Whitmore shot himself?" The kitchen was so quiet Nathan could hear the stove. "Because he was looking," Nathan said. "He was looking. He read the papers. He read your father's name. He read the water rights, and he read Montana Territory, and he sat on that bucket 16 years ago, and he knew that name. Nathan's voice was rising, and he couldn't stop it. He sent for it. He sent for the survey. He was checking. He was checking whether the thing that killed your daddy was the same thing that was eating him. And then he died, Clara said. And then he died 11 months later, and nobody ever opened the box. Clara looked down at the plat, and then she made a sound Nathan had never heard a human being make. Clara, she didn't answer. She had gone down onto one knee beside the table, not fainting, just down the way a person goes down when their body quits arguing with the paper still in her hand and her whole arm shaking. Clara, Clara, he was on the floor with her. What? What is it? Tell me what it is. She turned the plat around. Back down. In the bottom corner of that certified survey in the block where the land office recorded who had requested the copy and who had witnessed the filing, there were 2 lines of ink. One was a clerk's initials, EW, and the other was a signature Nathan had watched go across a ledger every morning for a month. Clara E. Whitmore, witness. That's not possible, Nathan said. That's Clara. That's June of '83. You were in Denver in June of '83. I was in Denver in June of '83, Clara said. Then it's forged. It's not forged. Clara. It's not forged, Nathan. It's mine. Her voice tore. That's my hand. I know my hand. Look at the E. Look at the way I close the E. Nobody forges the way a person closes an E. That's mine. She dragged in a breath. It's mine. It's just not from June. Nathan went cold all over. They moved it, he said. They lifted it. Clara was crying now openly, furiously. Off something I signed it in '82. Off one of those parlor papers. Off Mary Beckwith's papers. Off any one of the 40 things a stupid proud girl put her name on because her father asked her to, and they cut it, and they pasted it, and they certified it, and a clerk named Edward Wills stamped it, and it has been sitting in this house for 3 years. Why, Nathan said. Why my land? Why put your name on my land? And Clara Whitmore stopped crying all at once. She sat back on her heels on the kitchen floor with the paper in both hands, and Nathan watched her face go from grief to confusion to something else, something that came up out of her like water, finding a crack. And she said, because he needed a thief. What? He needed a thief, Nathan. She got up. She was still shaking, but she got up. 16 years he's been starving this place. And the day it finally falls, somebody's going to ask the same question you asked in that bank. Wait, why'd the coal place go under when every other outfit in this valley made it? And there'd be a court, and there'd be a record, and somebody would look. She held up the plat. Unless there's already a story, unless there's already a woman with her name in 4 newspapers who was witnessing land filings on the coal property in 1883, 3 years before she ever set foot in this county, unless the whole thing was her all along. Nathan couldn't speak. He didn't build that lie for me, Clara said. He built it for you. It was never about my father's $81,000. That was just money. He had money. He needed a name. He needed a bad name he could hang on this valley for the next 20 years, and he made one, and he made it out of a 23-year-old girl in a parlor because I was convenient. Her voice broke wide open. Nathan, I'm not the crime. I'm the cover. The stove ticked. Outside, somebody was louting a horse across the yard, and a dog barked, and the whole ordinary world went on making noise like nothing had happened. 3 years, Clara said. 3 years I've been apologizing for being the villain in a story where I was the prop. Nathan Cole took the paper out of her hands. He looked at her signature on his own land for a long, long moment. Then he folded it once and put it inside his shirt against his skin and said, then there's 11 days between now and April 1st, and there's one man alive who can prove where that signature came from, and he's a clerk in Helena, and he's Toby's uncle. Clara wiped her face with the back of her wrist. He'll never talk, she said. He wrote a 19-year-old boy 9 days after a letter left this valley, Nathan said. A man who won't talk, don't write. Toby wrote the letter at the kitchen table with 3 people watching him, and it took him 2 hours, and he cried twice. I can't do it, Mr. Cole. Yes, you can. He's my uncle. I know it. He paid for my boots. Toby put the pencil down. When my daddy died, there wasn't nobody, and he sent me boots and $1 every Christmas till I was 17, And now you want me to write him a lie so he'll... It ain't a lie, Clara said. Toby looked up. Every word in that letter is true, she said. That's the whole beauty of it, honey. You're going to tell him exactly what happened in this kitchen. You found out I found a plat. You found out my name's on it. You're scared. You don't know what to do. You want your uncle's advice. She leaned on the table. Toby, there is not one false word in it. If he's an honest man, he'll write you back and say, son, take it to a lawyer. And then we'll all sit down and I'll apologize to you and I'll say I was a suspicious woman who's been hurt too many times and I'll mean it. And if he ain't honest, then he won't write you back at all, Nathan said. He'll come. Toby picked up the pencil. Hattie put a plate of biscuits at his elbow like a woman laying flowers on a grave, and nobody said anything for a while but the scratching, and when he was done, he read it out loud in a voice that cracked on every third word, and Clara had to turn around and look at the stove. That's a good letter, Nathan said. It's a Judas letter. Toby, that's what it is. The boy's jaw was set. I ain't stupid, Mr. Cole. I know what I'm doing. I'm just telling you what it is so somebody in this room says it out loud. And Nathan Cole, who had been about to say something comfortable, that stopped and said instead, you're right, that's what it is. And I'm asking you to do it anyway, and I'm going to owe you for it as long as I live. Toby folded the letter. Then I want something, he said. Name it. When it's done, whatever happens, I want to be the one that says it to his face. Toby's chin was shaking, but his voice wasn't. Not you, not the sheriff, me. He don't get to hear it from a stranger. He raised me enough to owe me that. Nathan looked at him a long moment. Done, he said. Clara rode to town with him to mail it, and neither of them said one word for 4 miles, and then she said, that boy just grew about 10 years in a kitchen. Yeah. Nathan, if this goes wrong, it's already wrong, Nathan said. That's what I keep trying to tell you. 9 days, there ain't a wrong left to go to. They mailed the letter on the 22nd of March. And then Nathan Cole did the thing Clara had been dreading, the thing she'd watched building in him for 2 days like weather, and she couldn't stop it because she'd have done the same. He went to see Amos Deal. He found him in the stock pens behind the freight office, and Clara wasn't there for it. And she'd hear it later from Ed Marsh, and Ed Marsh told it the same way for 20 years. Nathan didn't yell. That was the thing everybody remembered. He walked up to a man he'd shaken hands with every spring for 6 years, and he said, Amos. Nathan, well now, you're in early. $26 a head. Deal stopped. In 84, Nathan said. Chicago, 26. You paid me 18. Now, Nathan, the Chicago price ain't the Miles City price. There's freight. There's 24 and 85. You paid me 16. Nathan, $6 a head. Nathan's voice never went up once. 200 head a year, 6 years. Amos, I want you to say the number out loud. Deal's face had gone the color of paste. I want you to say the number. Nathan, I got a family. So did I, Nathan said. And that was when Ed Marsh said the temperature changed in that yard. I had a brother. You know what my brother died of, Amos? He died of a doctor in Butte that cost $40 and a train ticket that cost $11. And I stood in my kitchen in the winter of 84 with $31 in a coffee can, and I could not make it be 51. And you had my $51, Amos. You had it in your pocket. You had it standing right there in my yard shaking my hand. Amos Deal started to cry. He was a big man, 60, and he stood in a stock pen and cried like a child, and he said, they come to me in 82. Who? A fella, city fella, said he represented interests. Deal wiped his face with his sleeve. Said if I set the coal price and kept it there, I'd get the Bar M contract and the Kessler contract and the whole east side of this valley. And Nathan, I want you to know, I didn't want to, but I had a bank in Miles City and a wife and don't. And I told myself it was just a price. It's just a price. Nathan prices go up and down. Ain't nobody signing nothing. It's just a number, a man says. It was my brother, Nathan said. Deal put both hands over his face. And then Nathan asked the question that changed everything, and he asked it quietly. Amos, how'd they know what? How'd they know you'd say yes? Nathan stepped closer. You're telling me a stranger rode into this valley in 82 and walked straight up to the one man who buys my beef and knew he had a banknote in Miles City he couldn't pay. How'd a man in Helena know what Amos Deal owed a bank 200 miles away? Deal's hands came down, and Ed Marsh said the look on his face was like a man hearing his own name called in the dark. "Oh God," Amos Deal said. "Say it." He knew what I owed. He knew the figure. He said it to me, Nathan. He said it like the weather. He said, $1,410 is a heavy load, Mr. Deal. Deal's voice went up. How'd I never, 16 years, I never once asked myself how he knew the figure. Because he came in kind, Nathan said. That's how. He came in kind and you were drowning, and a drowning man don't ask the rope where it's been. He walked back to Clara at the rail and his hands were shaking and he couldn't make them stop. Well, she said, he owns the banks, Nathan said. What? Clara, he don't buy men. He buys their debt and then he tells them what they owe and then he tells them how to pay it. Nathan swung up onto the horse. Holloway's got a wife. Deal's got a note in Miles City. Toby's uncle's got 20 years as a clerk on $11 a week. And me, he's got my whole life in a drawer for $1,140. He looked down at her. There ain't one villain in this valley, Clara. There's 12 decent men in a row, and every one of them thinks he's the only one, and every one of them is ashamed enough to keep quiet forever. Clara stared up at him. That's it, she said slowly. Nathan, that's it. That's the whole machine. Shame's not the side effect, shame is the lock. What? 3 years I couldn't fight him because I was ashamed. Her voice was rising. Amos Deal can't fight him because he's ashamed. Bill Holloway can't fight him because he's ashamed. Edward Wills can't fight him because he's ashamed. He doesn't need guns. Nathan, he doesn't need lawyers. He just needs 12 men who won't look at each other. Nathan sat there on his horse in the middle of the street. Then we make 'em look at each other, he said. Holloway broke on the 24th. He came out to the ranch after dark alone, which was a thing Bill Holloway had never done in his life, and he stood in the yard and wouldn't come inside. I'll say it here. Bill, it's 12 degrees. I'll say it here, Nathan, because if I come in your mother's kitchen, I won't be able to. He had his hat in both hands. In '84, I bought a piece of the Kessler place under my wife's name. Nathan waited. That's the bank examiner would call that a conflict. It had cost me my charter. It had cost me, Holloway's voice went. It was $400, Nathan. $400 11 years ago, and it wasn't even stealing. It was just stupid. And a man came to my office in January and put a copy of the deed on my desk and never said one word about it. He didn't threaten me. He never said a word. He just laid it down and smiled and asked after my wife's rheumatism. And then he asked about my note. He didn't even ask, Holloway whispered. I offered. Nathan closed his eyes. You see, Holloway said, that's the part I can't live with. He never made me do one thing. I did it all myself. I've been doing it myself for 4 months, and he's never once had to ask. Bill, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I ain't going to, Nathan said. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. And you'd be a fool to want it cheap. He came down off the step. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you that Amos Deal cried in a stock pen yesterday for the same reason, and that Toby Wills's uncle has been selling records in Helena for 6 years for the same reason, and that a woman in my kitchen has spent 3 years thinking she's the worst person in Montana for the same reason. Every one of you thinks you're the only one. Every one of you thinks you're the rot. He put a hand on Holloway's shoulder and felt the man flinch. There ain't no rot, Bill. There's a man with a list. Holloway stood in the dark and shook. What do you want me to do? He said. I want the assignment. I can't give you bank. Not the paper, Nathan said. The date, Bill. When did he first ask about my note? Not when he bought it. When did he first ask? Holloway went very quiet. September, he said. September. September of last year. Holloway looked up. Nathan, he asked about your note 6 months before he bought it. And he asked one other thing, and I've been sick about it ever since, and I couldn't figure why he'd want to know. What? He asked whether your father ever pulled a certified copy of anything from the Helena land office. The yard went absolutely silent. Nathan didn't move for 4 seconds. Then he turned and ran into the house so fast he took the door off its top hinge, and Clara came up out of her chair, and he stood in the middle of the kitchen with his hand flat against his chest where the folded plait sat against his skin, and he said, he's looking for this. What? Clara, he's been looking for this for 6 months. Nathan's voice was shaking. He asked Holloway in September whether my daddy ever pulled paper from Helena. He didn't ask about the ranch. He didn't ask about me. He asked, did the old man pull a copy? And Clara, that's not a man covering his tracks. That's a man who's lost something. Clara's hands went to her mouth. He doesn't know where it is, she whispered. He knows it exists. Wills would have told him a clerk certifies a copy he remembers who asked. But my daddy died 11 months later, and nobody opened that box. And for 3 years, Richard Hawthorne has been sitting in Helena knowing there's one certified plat somewhere in this valley with a forged signature on it. And he can't find it, Clara said. He can't find it. That's why he offered you $9,000. Clara's whole body had gone rigid. Nathan, he doesn't want the land. He has the land. He gets it April 1st for free. He offered $9,000 to get a signature on a bill of sale because a sale is clean and a foreclosure is a court, and a court means somebody goes through your father's papers. Nathan sat down hard. I've been holding the only thing he's afraid of, he said, against my chest for 2 days. And he told you it was there. Clara laughed wild, half a sob. He told you, at the door. Ask her about the necklace. He wanted you tearing this house apart looking at me, Nathan. He didn't want you looking in the barn. They sat in that kitchen and stared at each other. He's coming for it, Nathan said. Yes. Before April 1st? Yes. Clara, he looked up. Where's the safest place in Montana for a piece of paper that ruins Richard Hawthorne? She thought about it for a long time. Nowhere, she said. That's the answer. There isn't one. A hidden paper is just a paper waiting to burn. She stood up. So we don't hide it. We spend it. Meaning what? Meaning a certified copy is only worth something if somebody else can certify it's real, Clara said. One plat in your shirt is a story. One plat in your shirt plus the man who stamped it is a conviction. And Nathan, that clerk, is the only human being alive who can say those words, and he's been getting letters from a boy in your bunkhouse for 2 years, and he loves that boy enough to send him boots. You want to turn Edward Wills. I want to save Edward Wills, Clara said. And I mean that. I mean it exactly. Because he's a man on $11 a week who did one small thing for money 6 years ago and has been drowning in it ever since. And Nathan, I know what that man's mornings feel like. I know what he does at 3 a.m. I've been doing it too. Nathan looked at her. You feel sorry for the man who forged your name. I feel sorry for the man who's going to have to look at Toby, Clara said. The answer came on the 27th, and it wasn't a letter. It was a notice, and it was nailed to the door of the Grange Hall in Bitter Creek, and half the county read it before Nathan did. Meeting of the Bitterroot Valley Stock and Water Association. Saturday, March 28th. Matter of the North Fork allotments in the Coal Ridge frontage. All holders and neighbors invited. R. Hawthorne presiding. Nathan read it 3 times. He's got no standing, he said. He ain't a holder in this valley. He can't preside over. He bought the Kessler place in February, Ed Marsh said, not looking at him. And the Bar M in January. Nathan, he's the second biggest holder on that river as of 6 weeks ago. He can preside over anything he wants. Nathan stood in the street. Saturday, he said. Saturday. That's 4 days before my note's due. Yeah, Ed Marsh said. It is. Clara didn't want to go, and then she did want to go, and she changed her mind 11 times in 3 days, and Hattie finally said at the table, Girl, stop it. I'm not. You've been packing that bag with your eyes for a week. Hattie slammed the pot down. I've watched you do it. You look at the door every time somebody rides in. You've got your coat on the near hook now, not the far one. Don't think I ain't noticed you moved it Tuesday. Clara went red. You want to run, Hattie said. That's all right. Wanting ain't doing, but you sit there and let me say a thing. She sat down across from her. I've known that man since he was born. I held him when he was an hour old and his mother was too tore up to. And I have watched him for 4 years be a dead man walking around doing chores. 4 years, Clara. He got up and he worked and he ate and he weren't there. And then a woman fell out of a stagecoach. Hattie, I ain't finished. Hattie's chin was going. You think if you leave, you save him? That's what you think. You think you take the trouble with you like a doll on a rope. She reached across and grabbed Clara's wrist hard. You don't take the trouble, honey. The trouble's his. It's been his since 1871. It's on his land. It's in his daddy's box. All you take when you go is the only thing that woke him up. That's it. That's the whole transaction. You'd be leaving him with all the poison and none of the medicine, and you'd tell yourself you did it for love. And Clara, I have watched women do that for 60 years, and I have never once seen it work. Clara sat there with a 60-year-old woman's hand clamped on her wrist and couldn't say a word. Now, Hattie said, letting go, you're going Saturday, and you're wearing my blue because that black thing makes you look like your own funeral, and I'll not have it. The Grange Hall was full by 10 and standing room by 10:30, and Clara Whitmore walked in on Nathan Cole's arm, and the entire room stopped, and she did not stop with it. She kept walking. She walked to the third row and sat down and folded her hands and faced front, and Ed Marsh said afterward, it was the bravest thing he ever saw anybody do in that building, including the war meeting in '98. Richard Hawthorne opened it like a church service. Neighbors, thank you. I'll be brief and I'll be honest, and I'll say the hard part first because I've found that's the only kindness that keeps. Nathan's hand found Clara's under the bench. The North Fork is not going to carry this valley the way it's carrying it now, Hawthorne said. That's not opinion. That's a survey, and it's on the table, and any man here can read it. 6 outfits are drawing off one river, and 4 of you have been in a bad way for a decade. A murmur. Now I've bought the Kessler, and I've bought the Bar M, and I'll say plainly what I want. I want the Cole frontage. And Mr. Cole knows it because I sat in his kitchen a week ago and told him so with my hat in my hand. Heads turned. I offered him $9,000, Hawthorne said. The room made a sound like a wave. 9,000. Lord God. He turned it down, Hawthorne said. And neighbors, that's his right, and I'd have done the same, and I told him so. But there's a note on that place due Wednesday, and I hold it, and I'll say that plain too. And I did not want any man in this room hearing it from a rumor. He let that sit. So there it is. On Wednesday, either Nathan Cole pays me $1,140 or the Cole frontage comes to me at law. And every one of you will have to decide what you think of me, and that's fair, and I'll take it. And Clara watched 140 people fall in love with him. That was the thing. That was the horror of it. Nobody hissed. Nobody yelled. They nodded because he'd said the worst thing about himself out loud first, and every person in that room thought a crooked man wouldn't say that. He's good, Clara whispered. Yeah. Nathan, he's so good. I know. Now, Hawthorne set his hands on the table. That's the business. But there's another matter, and I'd give a year of my life not to raise it, and I'm going to raise it because if I don't, somebody will, and they'll do it worse. Clara stopped breathing. Some of you know the woman sitting in the third row. The whole room turned. Some of you have read her name in a newspaper. Some of you have said things about her in this building that I would not repeat in front of my daughter. Hawthorne's voice was thick. And I want to say to you all, as a Christian man, I have known Clara Whitmore since she was a girl. I loved her father, and I have spent 3 years defending her to people who wanted to see her hang. Clara made a sound. Her hand crushed Nathan's. Nathan, he's defending me. I know what he's doing, Nathan said. Hold on. Whatever was done in Helena, Hawthorne said, was done by Edward Whitmore, and Edward Whitmore is dead, and I'd ask this valley to let a dead man carry his own load. That girl was 23. She signed what her father put in front of her. That's not a crime. That's about a daughter. And the room softened. Clara felt it soften. She felt 140 people put down a weapon they'd been holding for a month, and she felt her own eyes fill, and she hated herself for it, and she could not stop it. He's going to kill me, she whispered. What? Nathan, he's setting me on the table. Her voice was shaking. He's making them love me first. Look at them. Look at them, they're sorry for me. You can't stab a woman they don't love, yet it doesn't cut. So, Hawthorne said, that's what I believed, up until Tuesday. The room went dead. Here it comes, Clara said. On Tuesday, I received a certified filing from the land office at Helena. Hawthorne reached into his coat. And I want to be very clear about what this is and what it isn't. This is not a newspaper. This is not gossip. This is a document from a government office with a clerk's stamp on it, and any man here can ride to Helena and pull the original himself, and I'd encourage him to. He unfolded it and laid it flat. This is a survey plat of the Coal Ridge North section, he said, dated June 9th, 1883. Nathan's hand went to his own chest and stopped. There is a witness signature on this document, Hawthorne said. In 1883, 3 years before that woman ever set foot in this county. No, Clara said out loud. The signature reads Clara E. Whitmore. The Grange Hall came apart. It wasn't a roar, it was worse. It was 140 people making the same small noise at the same time, the sound of a room deciding, and Clara Whitmore was on her feet before she knew she'd stood. That's forged. Clara. That is a forgery. I was in Denver. I was in a hotel in Denver in June of '83. I can name the street. Miss Whitmore. Hawthorne's voice was full of pity. Sweetheart, sit down. Don't call me sweetheart. Clara, I don't want to do this. Then why is it in your hand? Because a man in this room is going to lose his home on Wednesday, Hawthorne said. And for the first time, his voice rose, and it rose like thunder. And he's got a right to know that the woman doing his books was witnessing filings on his father's land 4 years before she claimed she'd ever heard his name. The room turned on her like a single animal. Nathan, Clara whirled. Nathan, tell them, Nathan, the copy. It's the same copy. It's your father's copy. Tell them. And Nathan Cole did not move. She would think about that for the rest of her life, not because he doubted her. She'd learn later at 3 a.m. at a gate exactly what was going through his head, that he had the twin of that document folded against his skin, and that the second he pulled it out in that room in front of 140 people, and Richard Hawthorne, it would be seen and it would be known and it would be gone by fire or by theft or by law inside of a week, and it was the only thing they had. He was doing arithmetic. He was doing the coldest arithmetic of his life, while the woman he loved was being burned alive 4 feet away. But Clara didn't know that. All Clara saw was silence. There it is, she said. Clara. There it is. She was laughing. It was terrible. I warned you, Nathan. Didn't I warn you day one in the snow? I told you. Clara, don't. I told you I was different. And that broke him. Nathan Cole stood up in the middle of the Bitterroot Valley Stock and Water Association and said in a voice that shook the rafters, different don't mean guilty. The hall went silent. Sit down, Mr. Cole. No, sir. Nathan came out of that row. You've had the floor 20 minutes. You've buried a dead man and you've buried his daughter, and you did it all with your hat off. I'll have 4 minutes. Nathan, Holloway said from the back. Don't. 4 minutes, Bill. Nathan turned to the room. How many of you have shaken my hand? Nobody answered. Go on, raise it. How many of you have shaken Nathan Cole's hand in this valley? Hands started going up. Slow then more. Ed Marsh, Tom Kessler, Miss Ansell, yes ma'am, you too. At my mother's funeral, you brought a pea and you were kind, and I've never forgot it. Miss Ansell's hand came down and went over her mouth. Now, how many of you have ever known me to like silence? Not once, Nathan said. 19 years, not one man. Never knowed you to, Nathan, somebody said from the back. Then I'm going to spend it. Nathan's voice cracked. Every bit of it. 19 years of not lying right here, right now. And if I'm wrong, you can take it all off me, and I'll deserve it. That woman has been in my house 41 days. She has been up before every man on my place every morning of it. She has fed hands who called her a thief to her face and then washed their shirts. She found $7,000 I'd been cheated of, and she found it in 9 days, and she gave it to me, and neighbors she could have taken it. She was alone in my kitchen and with my books and my strongbox for 6 weeks, and she took $8 a month, and she asked for a receipt. She asked me for a receipt because she's so scared of what people think of her that she wanted paper on $8. Somebody in the back made a noise. Now, Mr. Hawthorne's got a document, Nathan said. It's got her name on it. Fine. I'll tell you what else I've got. I've got a document too. I've got 6 years of Amos Deal's contracts, and I've got a county tax roll from 1881 that went up 6 times in 1 year on grass that hadn't changed. And I've got a bank president standing in the back of this room who can tell you the date. A stranger from Helena first asked about my private note, and it was September neighbors 6 months before he bought it. Mr. Cole and Tom Kessler, how'd you come to sell? You loved that place. Your daddy died on it. What happened, Tom? Tom Kessler stood up like a man in a dream. Taxes, he said. The hall made a sound. Say it again, Tom. Taxes went up, Kessler said. 81, 6 times, same as you. He looked around confused like a man waking. I thought I was the only one. I never said nothing because I was ashamed. I thought I'd done something wrong with my books. There it is, Clara said, and she was crying now. There it is, Bar M, Nathan shouted. Who's here from the bar bus? Right here. Your taxes. 6 times, the man said. 81. And the Grange Hall of Bitter Creek, Montana made a sound that nobody in it ever forgot. 140 people turning their heads and looking at each other for the first time in 14 years. 12 men in a row, Clara whispered. Nathan, they're looking at each other. Nathan turned on Richard Hawthorne, and his voice was pure fire. You want to talk about her 4 seconds in a courthouse in 1883, he said. Let's talk about your 16 years in this valley. You didn't buy this place. You didn't outwork us. You sat in an office 200 miles away, and you starved us, and you did it so slow and so kind that every man in this room thought he was just a bad rancher, and then you rode in with your hat in your hand and bought the corpses. Somebody stood up, then somebody else, and Clara Whitmore, standing in a borrowed blue dress in the 3rd row of a building where she'd expected to be destroyed, watched the room turn, watched it swing. Actually swing the way she had never once seen a room swing in 3 years, and she put her hand over her mouth and felt something so unfamiliar it frightened her. Hope. For about 9 seconds. Mr. Cole, Richard Hawthorne said. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't have to. The room came back to him because it always came back to him. That's a fine speech, he said. And I'd like the record to show I never once called you a liar. He turned to the hall. Neighbors, Mr. Cole says my document's forged. That's a serious charge against a government office, and he's entitled to make it, and I won't stand here and argue paper with a man in front of his neighbors like we're 2 dogs. He nodded toward the side door. So I brought the clerk. Clara's legs went out from under her. Nathan Cotter got an arm under her before she hit the bench, and behind him he heard a boy's voice say very small from the doorway where he'd been standing with the horses. Uncle Ed. Edward Wills was a small man with a bad collar and 41 years on him, and he came into that hall like a man walking to his own hanging, and he did not look at his nephew, and everybody in the building saw him not look. Mr. Wills is a clerk of records at the Helena Courthouse, Hawthorne said. 21 years, sworn officer of the territory. He certified that plat with his own hand. He stepped back and gave the man the floor. Ed, just tell them what happened, that's all. Just the truth, and then you can go home. And Edward Wills said in a voice like a rusted hinge, I certified the survey on June 9th, 1883. Was the witness present? Wills's hands were shaking so hard he had to put them behind him. Ed, Hawthorne said gently, was the witness present when you certified it? Uncle Ed, Toby said from the door. Nobody had ever heard the hall that quiet. Uncle Ed, look at me. Son, sit down, somebody said. You sent me boots, Toby said. His voice went up and broke in half. Every Christmas, $1 and a pair of boots, and you didn't have it to send. You wrote on my daddy's death that I'd never want for nothing. He was crying openly, and he didn't care. Uncle Ed, you got me this job. You wrote Mr. Cole twice. Why'd you write him twice? Edward Wills closed his eyes. Ed, Hawthorne said, and there was the first crack in it, the first thing that wasn't warm. Answer the question that was asked. Was she there? Toby shouted. That's all. Was she there, Uncle Ed? 'Cause you're the only man alive who knows, and you can end it right now. You can end the whole thing with one word. Sit that boy down, Hawthorne said, and that was the mistake. That was the only mistake Richard Hawthorne made in 16 years, and it lasted 3 seconds, and 140 people saw it. The flat, cold thing that came up through the kindness, like a rock through water, sit that boy down. And Ed Marsh said later, you could hear the whole room's opinion of him die, but it didn't matter, because Edward Wills opened his eyes and looked at nothing at all and said, yes. The word went through Clara like a bullet. Say it plain, Ed. Clara Whitmore was present in the records office at Helena on the 9th of June, 1883, Edward Wills said, and signed as witness in my presence, and I certified it. Clara didn't scream. Nathan always said afterward, that was the worst part. She didn't scream, she didn't argue, she just made one small sound, and went absolutely quiet, the way a person goes quiet when the last light goes out and they finally understand that it isn't coming back on. I was in Denver, she said, to nobody, almost politely. I was in Denver. Miss Whitmore. I have the hotel, she said. There's a book, a register, a man signs you in. Sweetheart, that's 3 years and 400 miles away. Hawthorne said so kindly it was obscene. Nobody can prove where they were 3 years ago. That's not your fault. That's just the world. And the room turned back. Clara felt it. She'd been feeling rooms turn her whole adult life, and she felt this one go. And it went fast and it went hard, and she stood in the middle of it in Hattie Pruitt's blue dress and understood that she had for one entire minute allowed herself to believe. That was the cruelty, not the lie, the minute. Nathan, she said. He was staring at Edward Wills. Nathan. He didn't answer. He didn't answer because he couldn't, because his mouth wouldn't work, because he had a forged plat against his skin, and a banknote due in 4 days, and 140 neighbors staring at him, and not one thing he could prove, and because for 1/2 of 1 second, and he would hate himself for that, half second until the day he died, a voice in the back of Nathan Cole's skull had said, "What if?" Clara saw the half second. That's all it took. 3 years had made her an expert. She could read a face the way Hattie read weather, and she looked up at the only man who had ever believed her, and she watched the half second cross his eyes, and she nodded. "There it is," she said softly. Clara. No, don't. She pulled her hand out of his gently, which was worse than if she'd torn it. "It's all right. I mean that. It's all right, Nathan. Everybody does it. Everybody gets one. You lasted 41 days, which is 38 more than anybody else, and I'm not..." Her voice broke and she fixed it. "I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I'm not angry at you. I never have been. I'm just tired." "Clara, listen to me. I told you," she said. "That's all. I just told you." And she walked out of the Granger wall through 140 people, and not one of them touched her, and not one of them said her name, and Nathan Cole stood in the middle of that room with his father's forged land in his shirt, and his mouth open and nothing coming out of it, while an old man at the front table said warmly to the neighbors, "Wednesday then, let's all be neighbors about it." He caught her at the gate again. Same gate, same hour, near enough, except this time there was no snow on her shoulders because this time she hadn't been standing. This time she was walking and walking fast, and she had the suitcase in one hand instead of two, and Nathan understood the difference, and it turned him inside out. "Clara, don't. Clara, stop. I'm not standing this time, Nathan." She didn't slow down. "That's what you're checking, isn't it? You want to know if I'm standing. I'm not. I'm walking. That's the whole difference, and you know it." He got the horse in front of her and got down and stood in the road. "Move." "No." "Move, Nathan." "No, ma'am." And Clara Whitmore swung the suitcase at him. She swung it at his chest with both hands, and it burst open in the road for the second time in 41 days, and everything she owned in the world went into the dirt. And she stood there with the empty handle in her fist and screamed at him, actually screamed at the top of her lungs in the middle of Montana, "You looked at me." Nathan didn't move. "You looked at me." Her whole body was shaking. For half a second, in that room, I saw it. I have spent 3 years learning to see it, and I saw it on you, and you don't get to tell me I didn't. "You didn't," Nathan said. "Don't you dare." "You didn't see doubt." He was very quiet. "You saw arithmetic, and I'll tell you what I was adding up, and then you can hit me with the other one." She stood there heaving. Nathan reached into his shirt and pulled out the plat. Clara went still. "I've had this against my skin for 6 days," he said, "since the night you found it. And I stood in that hall with 140 neighbors watching a man burn you alive, and every part of me from the neck down wanted to put this on that table." He held it up. "And the half second you saw was me doing sums. Because Clara, the second this is seen, it's gone. He'd have had it in a week. Fire thief court order, don't matter which, he owns 2 counties. It'd have been ash by Thursday, and then we'd have had nothing, and you'd have had nothing, and I'd have burned the only proof you exist for 9 seconds of looking like a hero in front of Ed Marsh." Her mouth opened. "That's the half second," Nathan said. "That's all it was. It wasn't, did she? It was, if I show this, she's got no way home." He put it back inside his shirt. "So you can call me a coward. That's fair. A braver man might have thrown it on the table and let it burn and felt real good for about a minute. But I ain't a brave man, Clara. I'm a rancher. I count. Clara stood in the road with an empty suitcase handle in her hand. Nathan, she said, and her voice had gone very small. He had a witness. I know it. He had a man in a courtroom collar under oath say my name and a date. I know it. And he wasn't lying. She was crying now, and it was the worst crying Nathan had ever seen because it was calm. Don't you understand? That's what nobody understands. Edward Wills wasn't lying. You can hear it. That man believes it. And I don't. Nathan, I don't remember June of '83. I don't. I remember April. I remember April so hard I can't sleep. And then there's Denver, and there's a hotel, and the whole summer's a smear. 3 years I've been saying, I was in Denver, and I have no more proof of that than he has of Helena. Her hands came up. What if I was there? Clara, what if I went? She was almost shouting. My father just died. I was 26 years old, and my father was dead, and everything he owned was in an office 200 miles away. What if somebody said, come to Helena, we'll sort your daddy's papers? And I went, I'd have signed anything. And Nathan, I'd have signed 40 things. That's my whole crime. That's the only thing I've ever actually done wrong in my life. I signed what men put in front of me. Nathan grabbed her by both arms. Look at me. I don't know, Nathan. Look at me. He gave her one shake. That right there, that's the machine. You hear it. That's it working right now in this road in the dark with nobody watching. He don't need a jury. Clara, he's got you doing it for him. He's had you doing it for 3 years. His voice cracked. You just built a whole story where you're guilty out of nothing but a smear and a bad summer. You built it. Nobody helped you. And you did it in about 40 seconds, and you'd have done it at 3 in the morning for the rest of your life if I hadn't been standing. Hear me out. Yes, I'm been dying. Clara's face came apart. Now here's what I know, Nathan said. You said 11 minutes. You've never once said a while. You said Denver, and you said the street. And 41 days ago in the snow, you told me to leave you today, and you meant it. And Clara, a guilty woman, don't do that. A guilty woman runs to a place where nobody knows her and starts over. She don't stand in a road and beg a stranger to let her freeze. He let go of her arms. Guilty people want to live, honey. It's the innocent ones that want to die. Clara put both hands over her face and went down in the road. He sat down in the dirt with her in the dark next to everything she owned. I want to believe you more than I want to breathe, she said into her hands. Then do. I can't. Then borrow mine, Nathan said, till yours comes back. She lifted her head. That's all a marriage is anyway, he said. 2 people lending each other the thing they run out of. Clara stared at him. Nathan Cole, she said. That is the worst time anybody has ever picked in the history of Montana. I know it. That is my life is on fire. I know it. And I ain't asking, Nathan said. I'm just telling you what I'm counting toward, so you know it's there. So when you're doing your sums at 3 in the morning, you've got the right numbers in front of you. He got up and started picking her clothes up out of the dirt one at a time and folding them badly and handing them to her. That's all. You can throw it out with the necklace if you want. Clara took a shirt out of his hands. You fold like a horse, she said. And then she started laughing, and then she started sobbing, and Nathan Cole sat in a road at midnight with his arms around a woman for the first time in 4 years and didn't say one more word. They were up at 4. Denver, Clara said. That's 400 miles. It's 400 miles, and it's 6 days to April 1st. She had the map out, and Hattie had the coffee on, and Nathan had never seen her like this. She'd gone hard and bright and fast like a knife coming off a stone. Nathan, I stayed at the Windsor, 3rd of May through the end of August. That's a register. That's a book. There's a nightman named Doyle with a mustache like a broom, and he signed me in and out every single day because he wouldn't give a woman her own key, and I hated him and Nathan right now. I love him more than my own mother. 6 days there and back on a horse? On a train. She jabbed the map. Bitter Creek to Corinne, Corinne to Ogden. Ogden to Denver. 3 days, 3 back. That's 6. That's Wednesday, that's the day. That's the wire coming in while he's standing in that bank. Clara. And it's not enough. I know it's not enough. A hotel register only proves I slept in Denver. It doesn't prove I wasn't in Helena on the 9th. A person could write it in Clara. What? The 9th of June, Nathan said, is a Saturday. Clara stopped. What? Look at your own almanac. You've been staring at that plat for 6 days and you never once looked at the day of the week. Nathan turned the ledger around. June 9th, 1883, Saturday. The Helena Land Office. Clara's hand went to her mouth. It is a county records office in a territorial courthouse, Nathan said. And I have been in it in '79 with my daddy, and there's a brass plate on the door that says 9 to 4, Monday through Friday. The kitchen went absolutely silent. Oh my God, Hattie said. That office was shut, Nathan said. Clara, nobody witnessed anything on June 9th, 1883, because there wasn't a soul in that building. Not you, not Wills, nobody. Clara sat down like her strings were cut. He didn't check the calendar, she whispered. He forged it in September of last year, Nathan said. 16 years of patience, and he did the last piece in a hurry because Holloway told him the old man might have pulled a copy, and he panicked, and he had Wills backdate it to a date that sounded right, and Clara, a man in a hurry, looks at the year. Nobody in the world thinks about what day of the week a Tuesday was in 1883. Clara's voice was shaking. Nathan, that's not evidence, that's an argument, a lawyer would say. The clerk came in special. They'd say, then let him say it, Nathan said. Let him stand in front of this valley and explain why a records clerk on $11 a week opened a locked government building on a Saturday to certify one plat for a dead man's daughter who was 400 miles away. He leaned in. Clara, it don't have to hang him. It just has to make 140 neighbors ask one question out loud. That's all. That's the whole game. He's got 12 men in a row who won't look at each other. We don't need a jury. We need one crack. Clara looked up at him. You're not a rancher, she said. You're a terrifying man, and you've been hiding in a barn for 19 years. Toby left that night without telling anybody. Hattie found the bunk empty at 5 and came into the kitchen with her hand over her mouth, and Nathan was out the door in 8 seconds, and it was old Silas, who'd said maybe 40 words in 41 days, who stopped him in the yard. Boy, Silas, get out of my... He went to Helena. Nathan stopped. Took the roan, Silas said. Took his own dollar. Left the note on my boot, 'cause he knowed you'd stop him, and he knowed I wouldn't. Why, pa? Same reason you'd go, Silas spat. He said you promised him. He said you promised he'd be the one that said it to his face. Nathan stood in that yard with his hands opening and closing. He's 19, he said. He's 19, Silas agreed. And he's rode 200 miles to tell an old man he loves him, and he's ashamed of him. And Nathan, that's the only weapon anybody's found yet. That's got a chance. He turned back toward the barn. You can't buy that one. Hawthorne ain't got a price for it. Nathan didn't sleep. Clara left on Sundays westbound with $40 borrowed off Hattie's egg money and Nathan Cole's coat. And at the depot, she turned around at the step and said, Nathan? Yeah. If I'm not back Wednesday, you'll be back Wednesday. If I'm not, she said, you sign his paper. Clara, $9,000. Her chin was up. Listen to me. If the register's gone, if Doyle's dead, if the train's late, if any one of 10 things, you sign it, Nathan Cole. You take the 9,000 and you fix that roof and you keep this place and you don't throw your father's whole life away for a woman with her name in 4 newspapers. No, Nathan. No, he said. And you know why? Because that's the arithmetic he wants me to do. That's the exact sum. He's been feeding me that sum for 6 months. He put his hand flat on the train step. And every man in this valley has done that sum and come out the same way, and that's why he owns them. Kessler did it. Deal did it. Holloway did it. Every one of them said it's just a price, it's just a signature, it's just one thing, and they were all right, Clara. Every one of them was right, and they're all his. The conductor called. Somebody's got to do the sum wrong, Nathan said. Somebody in this valley has got to be the one fool who won't. That's all I've got. That's the only thing I've ever had. I ain't smart and I ain't rich and I can't out-lawyer a man with 2 counties in his pocket, but by God, I can be stubborn, and it's the last thing left that money can't buy. Clara reached down and grabbed his collar in both fists. Then be stubborn till Wednesday, she said, and not 1 hour longer, do you hear me, Wednesday? If I'm not on that platform Wednesday morning, you sign. Clara, say it. I'll be on the platform, Nathan said. That's not what I asked. That's what you're getting, he said, and the train pulled out with her still holding his collar, and she had to let go, and she stood in the vestibule and watched him get small. It was the first time in 3 years she'd gotten on a train and not felt relief. Monday she was in Corinne. Tuesday she was in Denver. The Windsor was under new management. Register? The man behind the desk was 25 and bored. Ma'am, that's 3 years back. Yes. We don't keep. You keep them, Clara said. The territory requires you to keep them. 7 years. It's in the innkeeper's statute, and I know it's in the innkeeper's statute because my father wrote contracts for 4 hotels, and I read them when I was 19 years old and thought it was the most boring thing in the world. She put both hands on the desk. Where's Doyle? Who? The night man. Mustache. Wouldn't give a woman a key. Ma'am, I don't. He's dead, isn't he? Claire said, and her voice went, Say it fast. Ma'am, I've been here 8 months. I don't know a Doyle. The clerk stopped. He looked at her face, and something in a bored 25-year-old man went over the way it does sometimes for no reason anybody's ever explained. There's a Doyle drives the ice wagon, he said. Got a mustache like a broom. Clara found him on Larimer Street at 4 in the afternoon. Mr. Doyle. Yes'm. You wouldn't give me a key. The old man squinted at her for a long moment, and then his whole face changed and he said, oh Lord, it's the Whitmore girl. Clara couldn't speak. Every night, Doyle said. Every night for 4 months, you asked me for that key, and every night I said no, and you called me a well. He scratched his jaw. I read about your daddy, miss. Ain't a day I ain't thought about you sitting in that lobby. Mr. Doyle, Clara said, June 9th, 1883. That's a long time, miss. It's a Saturday. Was I in that hotel? And Doyle said slowly, Miss, you was in that hotel every night from May till September, and I know it cold, and you want to know why? Why? 'Cause I signed you in twice a day, he said. Once out, once in, every day. 4 months, 240 times. He shrugged. You were the only guest we had that summer that never once had a visitor. Not one. 4 months and nobody come for you. I said to my wife, that's the loneliest thing I ever saw in a hotel. Clara Whitmore stood on Larimer Street in Denver, Colorado, and cried in front of an ice wagon. She got the register at 7 that night. The clerk went into the cellar himself on his own time and came up with it covered in dust, and she opened it to June, and there it was in the night man's hand in ink in a bound book with a stamp on the cover bottom, Whitmore C, out 910A and 440P, June 9th, and under it, in the same hand, June 10th, June 11th, June 12th. Every single day. That ain't all, Doyle said. What? Miss, you don't need my book. He was looking at her strange. You need the other book. What other book? The one you kept, Doyle said. You sat in that lobby every afternoon that whole summer, writing in a little brown book. 4 months. I used to watch you. I asked you once what you were writing, and you looked at me like you'd bite me, and you said, he grinned under the broom. You said, I'm writing down everything that happened while I still remember it because someday somebody's going to tell me it didn't. Clara couldn't breathe. Where is it? She said. How would I know, miss, it's your book? And Clara Whitmore stood there, and 3 years came apart, and she remembered not all of it, not clean, but enough, a hotel room and a trunk and a brown book she'd filled, and then in September, in a fit of the blackest despair of her life, had left behind because she'd decided nobody would ever read it, and it was a madwoman's book, and she'd shoved it in the bottom of a wardrobe and walked out and never gone back. Mr. Doyle, she whispered. What happens to what guests leave? Cellar, Doyle said. Same cellar that book come out of. Everything goes in the cellar. Nobody's cleaned that cellar since the flood. At 11 o'clock that night, a woman in a borrowed coat and a 25-year-old desk clerk who was supposed to be off at 8 went through a hotel cellar in Denver, Colorado by lamplight. They found it at 1 in the morning. Small, brown, water-stained down one corner. Clara sat down on the cellar floor and opened it, and there was her own handwriting, 26 years old and furious and alive. And she turned to June, and the entry for the 9th said Saturday. Walk to the Cherry Creek Bridge. Nobody has written to me. Mrs. Hale next door says I should go back to Helena and face them. And I told her the office is shut on Saturdays anyway, and she looked at me like I was making a joke. I wasn't. I have not been able to make a joke since April 11th. And Clara Whitmore put her forehead down on a cellar floor and made a sound the desk clerk never forgot. She'd written it herself. 3 years ago in Spit of it, A broken girl in a hotel lobby had written down that the Helena land office was shut on Saturdays on the exact day they'd later swear she was standing in it. And she'd written it because she was lonely, because there was nothing else to do, because some stubborn thing at the bottom of her had refused to let the days go unrecorded, even when she was sure nobody would ever want them. "I saved myself," she said. "Ma'am, I saved myself." She was laughing, wrecked filthy, holding a wet book. 3 years ago, nobody helped me. I did it alone in a hotel lobby, and I didn't even know why. The eastbound left Denver at 6. She missed it by 9 minutes. The next one was Wednesday at noon and would put her in Bitter Creek Wednesday night, and Nathan Cole's note was due Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and Clara Whitmore stood on a platform in Denver with the proof of her whole life in a satchel and screamed at a station master until she had no voice left. "Ma'am, there ain't another train." "Then wire it." "You can't wire a book, ma'am." "You can wire words," Clara said. And she sat down on the floor of the Denver Telegraph office at 6:30 in the morning and spent every dollar Hattie Pruitt had made selling eggs. Meanwhile, Toby Wills had been standing outside the Helena courthouse for 2 days. He didn't go in. He couldn't make himself go in. He stood across the street and watched the door. And on the second morning, Edward Wills came out and saw a 19-year-old boy on the corner in a coat too thin for the season and stopped dead in the street and dropped his lunch. "Toby!" Toby didn't say anything. "Son, what are you?" Edward Wills looked up and down the street, fast the way Clara had once looked up and down streets. "You can't be here. You can't be seen here." "You said it in front of the whole valley," Toby said. "Toby, you put your hand up and you said she was there." The boy's voice was raw from 2 days of not using it. "And Uncle Ed, I stood in that door and I watched you say it, and I ain't dead since." Edward Wills stood in the street with his lunch in the mud. "Come inside," he said. "No." "Son, it's cold." "No." Toby's chin came up. "You come out here. You stood in a warm building and you burned a woman to the ground and you didn't have to look at nobody's face while you done it. And I ain't going in there so you can do it comfortable again. You want to talk to me, you talk to me on the street where God can see you." And Edward Wills, 41 years old, 21 years, a clerk, started to cry on a public sidewalk in Helena, Montana. "I did it in 83, he said. Toby went white. "The first one, your daddy's funeral was March and I sent you $11 and I didn't have $11, Toby. I had 4. He was gasping. "And a man come to my window in May and said he understood I had a nephew with no father, and he said there was a filing, needed tidying. And it was nothing, son. It was a stamp on a paper about a dead man's business, and he gave me $50 and I sent you boots." Toby couldn't speak. "And that's the last free thing I ever did in my life," Edward Wills said. 16 years. Because you can't do it once. Nobody tells you that. You do it once, and then he owns the once, and then it's twice, and then he don't even have to ask anymore. He just sends the paper, and I stamp it, and I go home, and his voice broke in half. "I got you that job at the coal place because I wanted one honest thing in the world with my name on it. That's the truth. That's the God's honest. I put you somewhere clean. And then you asked me to write you about her," Toby said. Edward Wills put his hands over his face. "Uncle Ed," Toby said, "was she in that office?" Silence. "Was she in that office?" "No," Edward Wills said. Toby's knees went. "She was never in that office. I never saw that woman in my life until Saturday." Wills was shaking so hard his teeth were going. "He brought me the plat in September. He said backdate it to 83. He gave me the signature on a strip of paper cut out of something, and I pasted it, and I copied the flourish, and I stamped it, and I—" "You swore," Toby said. "I know it. In front of the whole valley, you swore with your hand. I know it, son." Toby Wills stood in a street in Helena and looked at the only family he had left in the world. "Then come back with me," he said. "They'll hang me." "Maybe." "Toby, 21 years. I'd go to prison. I'm 41 years old." "Yeah," Toby said. Edward Wills stared at him. "That's it," he said. "That's all you got." "Yeah." "Uncle Ed, I ain't got a speech." Toby wiped his face with his sleeve. "I'm 19 and I muck stalls. I can't tell you it'll all right because it won't. You'll lose everything. That's just true." He took a breath. "But you sent a boy boots for 4 years with money you didn't have. And I've thought about it 200 miles and I can't make them the same man. I can't. and I figure one of them's got to be the real one, and I rode 200 miles to find out which. Edward Wills stood there for 11 seconds. Clara counted them later when he told it. 11. Get my coat, he said. Wednesday morning, Nathan Cole was on the platform at 7. Clara wasn't on the eastbound. He stood there while it emptied, and the last man off was a drummer with a sample case, and Nathan stood on that platform in front of Ed Marsh and Miss Ansell and half of Bitter Creek and did not move for 2 full minutes. Nathan Holloway said quietly behind him, "It's 7:40. I know what time it is." He's at the bank at 4. Nathan, $9,000 is still on the table. He told me so himself this morning. He said he'd honor it till 4 o'clock. Bill. He said it kindly, Holloway said miserably. God help me, Nathan. He said it so kind. At 9:15, the telegraph key started. At 9:40, it was still going. At 10, Wendell Pyle, who had run the Bitter Creek telegraph office for 11 years and had never in his life had a wire run more than a page, came out into the street with ink on his hands and his collar undone and said to nobody, to everybody, "Somebody get Nathan Cole." It was 41 pages. Clara Whitmore had sat on a floor in Denver and wired the diary. Not a summary, not an argument. On the book day by day, June 1st through June 30th. Every entry word for word, in her own words, 3 years old with the weather in it and the loneliness in it and Mrs. Hale next door in it and the 9th of June in it, saying the office is shut on Saturdays anyway. And then at the end, one line of her own from that morning. Original book in my hand. Hotel register in my hand. Nightman Doyle coming on the noon train at his own expense. I am 6 hours behind this wire. Do not sign. C.W. Nathan read it standing in the street. Then he read it again. Then he handed it to Ed Marsh, who read it and gave it to Tom Kessler, who read it. And by 11 o'clock that morning, there were 30 people in the street outside the telegraph office. And Wendell Pyle was copying pages by hand as fast as he could write. And Miss Ansell from the hotel was reading page 11 out loud on the boardwalk in a voice that kept breaking. And a woman nobody had liked 6 days ago was being read aloud to the whole town in her own words at 26 years old, alone in a hotel lobby writing down her days because someday somebody was going to tell her they hadn't happened. At noon, Miss Ansell walked into the telegraph office and put $5 on the counter. "That's what I took," she said. "Wendell, you send it to that girl." At 1 o'clock, Amos Deal rode in from Miles City with a strong box on the saddle and his hat in his hand and stood in the street and said, "Nathan, it's 400. It ain't 7,000. It's what I got today. The rest will take me 10 years, and I'll pay every dollar of it if I have to sell the house." At 2, Tom Kessler put down 200. At 2:20, Silas came in from the ranch with an old sock and owed $1 in it, 40 years of it, and wouldn't say a word to anybody. At 3, they were at 960, and the bank closed at 4. And at 3:40, Bill Holloway walked out of the First Territorial with his own coat on in front of his own tellers and put $180 of his own money on the counter of the telegraph office and said out loud so the street could hear it, "In 1884, I bought a piece of the Kessler place under my wife's name, and I have been that man's dog for 4 months, and I want it said in front of everybody so he can't ever say it to me again." Nobody moved. Then Tom Kessler said, "Bill, you bought a piece of my place." "I did." "Well, hell, Bill," Kessler said. So did he. And the street laughed, actually laughed ugly and shaking and half crying, and Nathan Cole stood in the middle of $1,140 made out of a whole valley's shame and understood that the lock had come off. At 4 o'clock, Richard Hawthorne came into the bank. He was smiling. He had the note in his hand and a bill of sale in his pocket, and he said, "Mr. Cole, it's 4. And Nathan Cole said $1,140 and put it on the counter in coins and paper in one old sock. Hawthorne looked at it. He looked at it for a long moment, and then he laughed warm as a fire and said, "Well, good for you. Truly, that's a fine thing." He picked up the money. "You've bought yourself a year, Mr. Cole. I'll say it kindly, you've bought yourself 1 year, and I've got 16. I'll be back next April, and the year after, and the year after that." "Maybe," Nathan said. "There's no maybe in arithmetic, son." "There's a Saturday in it," Nathan said. Hawthorne's hand stopped. Just for a second. Just once. June 9th, 1883, Nathan said, was a Saturday. And that courthouse is shut on Saturdays, and it's been shut on Saturdays since '74, and there's a brass plate on the door that says so. And Mr. Hawthorne, every man in this street has read it by now because a woman in Denver spent $40 of egg money wiring her own diary into this town one word at a time. The bank was silent. You forged a Saturday, Nathan said. And Richard Hawthorne, 16 years, 2 counties, 12 men in a row, said very quietly, that proves nothing. A clerk can open an office. Yeah, Nathan said, he can. And the door opened, and Edward Wills walked in out of the cold with his nephew's hand on his back and stood in the middle of the First Territorial Bank of Bitter Creek, Montana, and said, no, he can't, and I didn't, and I want to make a statement. Richard Hawthorne did not look at Edward Wills. That was the thing Nathan noticed and remembered for years. A man with 16 years of patience in him didn't waste 1 second on the clerk. He looked at the door, then the window. Then he counted the people crowding in behind Toby, and Nathan watched him understand the number. Ed, Hawthorne said pleasantly, long way from your desk. Why don't you and I take a walk? No, sir, Edward Wills said. The bank went still. I've took walks with you for 16 years. Everyone cost me something I can't get back, and you never once had to raise your voice, and I'd like it said out loud in front of these people that I have never been so afraid of a man who was so nice to me. Mr. Wills, Nathan said, you wanted to make a statement. Wills took off his hat, and his hands shook so bad the brim rattled. On the 9th of June, 1883, the Helena Land Office was shut. It's shut every Saturday and has been since '74. Nobody was in it. Clara Whitmore has never set foot in that building, and I never laid eyes on her till last Saturday in that hall, when I stood up and swore she had. He drew a breath. I forged that plat in the September. He laid it in my tray on a Thursday and said 83 and gave me her signature on a strip put off a subscription list, and I pasted it, and I inked the flourish, and I never checked the day of the week because I ain't checked anything in 16 years. I just stamp what he sends. Ed. And I done it the first time for $50 in May of '83, and I bought that boy a pair of boots with it. Toby put a hand on his uncle's back. And Clara, telling this 100 times over, 20 years, always said the same thing about what happened next, and it was the only part that ever frightened her. He didn't get angry. He got reasonable. All right, Hawthorne said. This is a clerk on $11 a week who has just confessed to 16 years of forging territorial records. A confessed forger isn't a witness, neighbors. He's a defendant trading up. Any lawyer in Helena will say so in 9 seconds. He turned and he was kind about it, which was the horror. Ed, I'm sorry. Truly, you've destroyed yourself for nothing and you did it in a bank. Nothing you've said touches me. There isn't a mark of mine on any paper in this territory. He's right, Holloway said. He'd gone gray. Nathan, God help us, I've handled his paper 4 months and I couldn't swear to his signature. Then it's my word against the felons, Hawthorne said, and I'll take that trade every day of the week. He picked up his hat, and Clara Whitmore was standing in the door. Filthy, 3 days on a train, 1 night in a cellar, hair down. Hattie's blue ruined a satchel in one hand, and a broom-mustached old man breathing hard behind her. The night train ran early, she said, apologizing absurdly to the whole room. Clara, Hawthorne smiled. You look well. I look like I slept in a cellar. You look well. You've got color. You didn't have color in Helena. And Clara laughed clean easy, and it went through that bank like a window breaking because every soul there had watched him take her apart 6 days ago, and not one had expected to hear her laugh at him. You're right about Ed, she said. A confessed forger's worth nothing in a courtroom. I know that better than anybody alive. She set the satchel on the counter. So I didn't bring you a witness. She opened it. I brought you a Saturday. The register went down first. Bound, stamped, dust in the spine. The Windsor, Denver, Keeper's Register, held under statute 7 years subpoenable in any court in this country and not the property of anybody named Whitmore. The diary beside it. My book, my hand, in a cellar since September of '83, 14 months before you thought to forge that plat. Richard, I wrote that the office was shut on Saturdays before you decided to say I was in it. The room made a sound. And this is Mr. Doyle. He wouldn't give a woman her own key. He signed me in and out twice a day for 4 months, 240 times. He's 68 and he paid his own fare. Her voice went hard. You can't buy him. Everybody's got a price, honey. Not him. Your machine needs a man to owe you first. A note, a tax bill, a nephew, a dead father, a hole. Then you fill it, and then you own it. She didn't blink. Mr. Doyle never took anything from me but a bad word. There's nothing in him to get a hook into. That's why he's standing there and you're standing here. Paper's arguable, Hawthorne said. Oh, yeah, Clara said. It is. And then she said the thing that ended it. So let's talk about the 11 minutes. His face didn't change, but Nathan was watching the thumb on the hat brim and it stopped. Ed, you certified the first filing in May of '83. My father died April 11th. Her voice was perfectly steady. That's backwards. Nobody hires a clerk to bury a dead man's papers unless somebody first went and got them. There was a letter in my father's hand. It took me 11 minutes to run for help, and when I came back, it was gone. Miss Whitmore, I know you didn't. You were 41 and scared of your own shadow. She turned her head. But you saw it, Ed, before you burned it, didn't you? Ed, Hawthorne said, quiet, flat. And every person in that bank heard it the first time in 16 years Richard Hawthorne had ever had to say a man's name that way. Ed, don't. Edward Wills looked at Hawthorne, then at his nephew. Then he did the bravest thing anybody in Bitter Creek ever saw a small man do. It said, Richard, they are asking me for the partnership, and I have nothing to show them but your word. I would rather be dead than watch my daughter watch me be called a thief. Tell them the truth. Tell them she signed nothing but what I asked her to sign. She is 23, and she trusted her father, and that is not a crime. His voice went. It was addressed to him. I took it out of the tray, and I read it, and I burned it in the courthouse stove, and I have been dead since, and I want that written down. Clara made no sound at all. He begged you, she whispered, with his last hand, not to save him, to say 4 words about a girl. That's hearsay, Hawthorne said. A burned letter no man alive has seen recited by a felon. In a courtroom, it's less than nothing. I know, Clara said. Richard, we're not in a courtroom. And she turned around and looked at the bank. 40 people. Ed Marsh, Tom Kessler. Amos Deal with his hat crushed in both hands. Holloway with his coat still on. Miss Ansell with $5 gone out of her tillo. That's what I finally understand, Clara said. You've never been afraid of a judge. You own judges. You've been afraid of a room. A room where 12 men who've all been ashamed for 16 years look at each other at the same time. Nobody breathed. Tom Kessler 6 times on your taxes. Amos Deal $6 a head. Bill Holloway $400 in a deed in your wife's name. Ed Wills $50 and a pair of boots. Nathan Cole, who thought for 16 years he was just a bad rancher. Her voice rose and broke and kept going. Every one of you thought you were the rot. Every one of you kept quiet to protect the one thing you did, and that silence is the only wall this man has ever had. He hasn't got guns. He's got 140 people who won't say a sentence out loud. She was crying and she didn't stop and she didn't cover her mouth. I did it too. I did it longest. 3 years I wouldn't say his name in a kitchen. Every day I stayed quiet. I built him another foot of wall out of my own shame, and I did it for free. He never paid me a dime. He never had to. Silence. Then Tom Kessler stood up. 6 times, 81. I never told a soul. 6 under market, 6 years, Amos Deal said. I never told a soul. $400 under my wife's name, Holloway said. I never told a soul. $50, Edward Wills said, and a burned letter. Somebody in the back said, bar M 6 times. Then another, then another. And it wasn't a roar, and it was worse than a roar. It was arithmetic. 40 people in a bank adding up out loud for the first time in 14 years. Richard Hawthorne stood in the middle of it and watched his wall come down brick by brick, and there was nothing he could buy, threaten, or file to stop it, because the only currency he'd ever traded in was silence, and the Valley had just spent every dollar of it at once. You can't prove any of that, he said. We don't have to, Nathan said. Hawthorne turned. I've been thinking about you 3 weeks, and I've finally worked out what you are. You ain't a thief. Thieves take things. Nathan stepped forward. You're a banker. Everything you own in this world you own because somebody owed you and was ashamed about it. That's your whole estate. He put his hat on. And it just got paid off. All of it. In one room, in about 4 minutes. There ain't a man in this valley owes you a secret anymore. So what have you got? I've got the Kessler place. I've got the bar mom. You've got grass, Nathan said. You paid triple for the 2 worst outfits in the county, and now you've got to ranch at 60 in a valley where every man knows what you are. You've never worked a day. You've waited, and you can't wait anymore because nobody here will stand still for it. Hawthorne looked around that bank, and Clara, who had studied his face for 3 years the way a sailor studies weather, saw the exact instant it happened. The kindness went, not into rage, into nothing. The warmth went out of him like a lamp turned down, and what was underneath wasn't a monster at all. It was a bookkeeper. You've cost me 16 years, he said. No, sir, Clara said. You spent them. He walked out. Nobody stopped him. Nobody touched him. Ed Marsh always said that was the strangest part. 100 people in a street, and not one hand went out, and Richard Hawthorne rode out of Bitter Creek at a walk in daylight with his hat on straight. He never came back. It did not go the way it goes in stories. He was never hanged, never even arrested. He fought it 26 months with 3 lawyers out of Helena, settled the water suit sold to Kessler and the Bar M at a loss, and left the territory. The papers that printed Clara's name in 1883 printed a correction in 1888. Page 6, 4 inches. 4 inches, Clara said, and put it down and laughed real, only a little broken. You know what the front page had? A horse show. You want me to write 'em? God, no. She folded it into her apron. I don't need the front page, Nathan. I needed the 4 inches. It took me a year to learn the difference. Who's it for? Mary Beckwith, Clara said. Mary Beckwith answered her letter in 3 weeks. 4 lines. Child, I never once thought it was you. I said so to the sheriff and to the paper, and neither of them wrote it down. Keep the necklace. It was never worth anything, and neither was the house. I have a room now, and it is warm. Come and see me, because I am 69, and I would like to see your face without you looking so afraid of it. Clara read it twice and set it on the table and said very flat, she told them. Honey, 5 years. She was up walking. Doyle said nobody came for me in Denver 4 months, and the whole time there was a woman scrubbing floors in Helena, telling anyone who'd listen, it wasn't me, and it never got 1 line. She sat down on the floor. Nathan sat down with her because he'd learned that too. 5 years I served a sentence for a woman who never handed it down. Her voice tore. Nathan, I could have written that letter in 1883. Yeah, he said, you could have. Don't you dare be kind about it. I ain't. You lost 5 years, and that's real, and I won't pretend it away. He took her hand. But you didn't write it because you were sure. You'd have bet your life on the answer. You did bet your life on it. He squeezed. And you were wrong. The one thing you never doubted, the thing you thought was solid ground, was flat wrong. She stared at him. So what else are you wrong about? Nathan said. Clara went to Helena in August and stood outside the bakery for 40 minutes. I can't make my legs go. Nathan, I faced a bank. I faced him. Why can't I? Because none of them could hurt you, Nathan said. She can. That's the only difference that there's ever been. You've been brave in front of people who didn't matter for 5 years, honey. This is the first time it's cost anything. Mary Beckwith opened the door, looked at her about 2 seconds and said, Oh, honey, look at you. You're too thin. And pulled her in by the wrist like laundry before rain. That was the whole reckoning. 5 years, 4 newspapers, 11 towns, and a 69-year-old woman said you're too thin, and it was over. They married in October in the Grange Hall because the church was too small, the same room where 140 people had watched her burn, jammed with 180 to watch her marry. When the preacher asked if anyone had cause, there was a half second where every soul in that building remembered the last time somebody spoke up in that room. Nobody said a word, and Clara laughed out loud into the silence, both hands nowhere near her mouth, and the whole hall broke. Nathan deeded the water to the association in '93. All of it, 6 outfits in perpetuity. You're giving away $9,000, Holloway said. I'm giving away a hole, Nathan said. That's all it ever was. A hole's just a place waiting for a man to come fill it up and own you. I ain't leaving one lying around for my kids. The mirrors were the last thing. Winter of '94, 8 years, 3 kids, a roof on the barn. He found her standing at the glass, not doing anything. How long since I did this? She said. Did what? Looked. Nathan did the sum the way he did every sum. 8 years, near enough. I turned them to the wall. Every hotel room, 11 towns before I set my bag down. I never once asked myself why. She touched the glass, because I already knew what was in it. A woman who smiled at Mary Beckwith and took her house. She turned around and her face came apart and she was laughing and crying at once. Nathan, she's not in there. I looked 10 minutes, I couldn't find her anywhere. She never was there, honey. No, don't make it easy. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand, furious exactly like Hattie. She was there in '83 and in the snow when I told you to let me die. She was as real as you are. She just wasn't me. She was a woman a man built. He needed a thief, so he made one out of a girl in a parlor and handed her to me, and I carried her 11 years and called her by my own name. She looked back at the glass. I put her down. When? I don't know. She started laughing again. That's the whole thing, Nathan. There was no day. Nobody rang a bell. I set her down somewhere and never noticed. And I've been walking around free for God knows how long, still ducking. He found her on the hill that evening. Not lost. Sitting. He sat down and didn't say anything for a while because he'd learned that in a snowfield in 1886 and never unlearned it. Then, still think you're different, Clara laughed. Yes, she said. And Nathan turned and looked at her, that face of a man who had never once gotten ahead of her and had never once minded. Yes, I always was, since I was 23 until they put me in the ground. She pulled her knees up, and I'm done apologizing for it. Good. 11 years it took me. I thought different meant broken. Every time I said it in the snow at the gate in that hall, I was saying, stay back, I'll break you too. She looked out over the ranch. But different doesn't mean broken, Nathan. Different just means nobody's built a place for you yet. I wasn't hard to love. I was standing in 11 towns full of people who didn't know how, and I decided that was a fact about me. Her voice went quiet. It was a fact about them. Nathan held out his hand. She took it. That's the woman I saw, he said, day one, you did. Lying in the road telling me to go on and let her freeze. You saw a wreck. I saw somebody who'd rather die than cost anybody anything. That's not a wreck. That's the best thing I ever saw in my life. It was just pointed the wrong way. He squeezed. All I did was turn it around. No, she turned. You never caught me, Nathan Cole. Not at that gate, not in that road. I could have gone around you any day of 11 years and you'd have let me. Her eyes filled. You never held me anywhere. You just made it so there was somewhere worth standing still. Nathan Cole took off his hat and put it over his heart. Clara laughed so hard she had to lie back in the grass. Don't you dare work the first time, he said. 4 newspapers, 3 states, 11 towns, and her own reflection had all told Clara Whitmore she was a woman who ruined everything she touched, and she believed every one of them for 5 years. Then one quiet cowboy who counted for a living did the arithmetic out loud, got a different number, and refused in a snowfield at a gate, in a road, in a bank in front of 140 neighbors to be talked out of it. She wasn't broken. She was just the only person in the world who hadn't been told the truth yet.